Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jill Osborne. I am the president and founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Sunday, April 7th, and it is time to do a live IC support group meeting. So while I get my computer all set up here, take a moment and let some people come on in. Now, my purpose in doing these meetings is to help patients be so strong, so knowledgeable, so informed that no one can tell you that IC is all in your heads, right, my friends? Because it is not. It is real. It is treatable. And oh my God, do I have an amazing patient story to share with you? That's how we're gonna start the meeting today. So if you can, we are simulcasting live on Facebook and YouTube. If I'm looking up here, it's Facebook. If I'm looking down here, it's YouTube. If I'm looking over here, it's my other computer. It takes a lot to make these happen. Hi, Tabitha. Hi, Becky. How are you? Hi, Charlene. Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you over there on YouTube. God, we got a ton of questions that were submitted by email. I sent out a blast email yesterday to about 35,000 people to let them know. And what's so interesting about these groups is while, you know, we might only have 100 or so people actually at the live event, within 24 to 48 hours, it's usually seen by about 1,000 IC patients. So that's pretty exciting. Thank you, Ravonda. Thank you, Ravonda. I appreciate that. Hi, Maureen. Hi, Henriette. Hi, Laura. Hi, Donna. Nice to see you guys. You know, it's so funny as I was kind of setting up this room last night. I was, you know, I love this poster right here that says love never fails. But, you know, you might not see the never. and if you only see the love fails, that's really exactly the wrong message that I'm trying to give you. So anyway, so again, my purpose in doing these meetings is to make you so strong, so knowledgeable, so informed that no one can mess with you, that no one can tell you that IC is all in your head, that no one can say that there's no therapies, because that could not be farther from the truth. IC is real. IC is treatable. And in fact, it might actually blow your mind when I tell you that we don't even think of IC as an incurable bladder disease anymore. We don't. We don't. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when you went to a urologist's office and you were given a diagnosis of IC, they told you there was nothing you could do, right? Okay, that's not true anymore, because now we know that IC really instead is more of a pelvic pain syndrome. How do we know that? Because we know that other structures are often involved in the pelvis. You go back 30 years or more, and you look at those original journal articles, what you're going to see are doctors describing muscles so tight they resemble tight piano strings. I mean, that's consistent for 50, 60 years. Doctors have said IC patients and actually also chronic prostatitis patients have very tight pelvic floor muscles. And yet they had tunnel vision. They were focused on the urinary tract. And it wasn't until 2008 that the National Institutes of Health released their first research study exploring the use of pelvic floor physical therapy as a treatment for IC. And that data was incredible. In fact, pelvic floor physical therapy is actually known to be more effective than many of the treatments that you associate with the bladder. So that was the moment when the IC movement was turned on its head, because prior to 2008, we all thought bladder. But after 2008, it's like, no, wait a second here. If pelvic floor physical therapy helped patients, maybe that means that for some people, IC isn't the bladder at all. IC is really about muscles. It's about muscle pain, right? And you know, what's so interesting is I had a hydrodistension 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, my anniversary date for my hysterectomy. It's coming up next month. And my bladder is completely normal. And yet there's no doubt I'm an IC patient, none at all. So how can I, with a normal bladder, have IC? Well, the answer is really mine is a different subtype. Mine is pelvic floor and something else. And so what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about the other conditions that we know can trigger bladder symptoms, right? So, and again, I've got an amazing patient story to share. I got several good patient stories to share. But before we do that, I just want to introduce myself. For those of you who haven't seen me before, my name is Jill Osborne. I am the founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. I've been doing this for 25 years. We are the largest IC patient support organization in the world. Our website is rated #1 in the world by Harvard Medical School and the University of London in 2 peer-reviewed research studies. So we really hope that you will come on over to our website and read about it. Yes, there are other IC groups. There are a lot of IC groups in the world, right? So we're the IC group in the United States that's located in California, and you can come visit us at ic-network.com. That is one of the largest archives of IC information in the world. These live support chats are done twice a month, the first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 Pacific time. However, I am well known to drop in and do sudden meetings when I've got the time and when I've got a little angel on my shoulder saying, maybe this is a good time to do a meeting. Maybe somebody needs something. Known to do them at midnight California time or at 7 a.m. California time. My goal is to try to catch as many people as I can at different times, as well as people in other countries. I will tell you that this support group meeting is sponsored by Preleaf. Preleaf is the oldest and most commonly used supplement by patients with bladder sensitivity or acid sensitivity. It is calcium glycerophosphate. It's been around for 25 plus years. And if it has helped thousands, tens of thousands of patients eat a more balanced diet. Or more importantly, if you're going out and you've got to go eat at grandma's house and she's going to make spaghetti and you know spaghetti is going to irritate the heck out of you, this is when you take Preleaf. And so we're incredibly grateful for Alan Kligerman, the gentleman who invented Preleaf 30 years ago. A new company has it, DSC Healthcare Solutions. And you can buy this right on our website. I want to give you one warning, though. Patients who are desperate are willing to do anything and willing to try anything. And we are, hey, man, hello, I'm one of you. And back when I was first diagnosed, I was the same way. It's very important that you not take any medication like candy. It doesn't matter if it's a prescription medication or Preleaf. Please just don't keep swallowing it. You use this when you're going to eat, all right? If you take an excess of calcium, you could get calcium-based kidney stones. So we got to be modest and prudent. We don't want desperation to drive our decision-making, correct? Now, I always do these support group meetings in 3 sections. I'm going to do educational content first for about 30 minutes, and I'm going to take your questions. And then at some point in time, we'll have a freebie. We'll see, right? We'll see what I have in mind for our freebie for today. So if you're on YouTube, please make sure you come like our YouTube page. You guys, we really need more and more likes on our YouTube page because I'd like to be able to offer more information, but I can't do it without 10,000 likes. So if you could come on over there, that would be absolutely great. For those of you on Facebook, if you could please share this with in your own feeds on Facebook, that would be fantastic. Let your other IC buddies know that we are doing this. Now. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. So I have an unveiling to do. I'm going to have a couple of really exciting unveilings in the next month. We have a brand new flare management kit that we've been working on for the last couple of months that you'll be able to get. But our unveiling is this, which is our latest IC Optimist magazine. The IC Optimist is a quarterly magazine that goes out to members of the IC network. You can also buy individual copies. My theme for this magazine, again, is the theme for our meeting tonight, and that is, what are the other things that can get missed? When you're an IC support group leader, we get patients who find their answer quickly, and then we get patients who try everything, and nothing works. And when the American Urology Association released their guidelines for IC, one of the things that they said back in 2011 and 2014 is if a patient is not responding to therapy, we want to make sure that we revisit the diagnosis. Let's make sure we know what we're treating here because it's really easy to miss things. So let me share a patient story from this week. Amazing story. All right. So here I am over at trivia night at our local pub. And I have been known every now and then to have a little hard cider, although I didn't. I was having sparkling water. And we joined another group for trivia night. And so there were 4 of us. And the lady that I was sitting next to was a retired internist. Very sweet, very, very quiet woman who it was kind of hard for me to get a read on her at first because she was very, very quiet. But we had a great night. We came in second on trivia night. Yeah, we won a $30 gift certificate. That was cool. But once the man in our group left, she had a very interesting story to share. So she asked me, what do you do? And I said, well, I work with patients with pelvic pain. She goes, well, I have an interesting pelvic pain story. And I'm like, ooh, tell me. I like these stories. So when she was a doctor, she was a runner. Okay. She ran up to 18 to 20 miles a week, as we introverts are known to do. We like to do sports like that. And she suddenly noticed, probably in her 50s, I didn't get the exact age, but it wasn't that long ago, that she had blood in her urine. And she could see it. She could see blood in her urine. And it was concerning. And so she did her due diligence and she went to a urologist, and a urologist did a cystoscopy, looked in her bladder. Bladder looked healthy. Sent her on her way. Still had blood in her urine, had more blood in her urine. And then while she was running, she started experiencing pain, pelvic pain. And it got so intense, she couldn't run. Then she started experiencing pelvic pain when she was walking. Now imagine being a doctor and not being able to walk. She goes back to the urologist. The urologist is like, we have no idea what is wrong with you. It must be all in your head. It might surprise you to know that doctors are incredibly cruel to other doctors who are sick. And it's fascinating how that happens. In fact, one of our big IC doctors, personal IC doctors that helped me with the IC network many years ago, had his prostate removed, and he experienced something very, very similar. Fascinating. So here you've got a woman, she's bleeding from her bladder. She has intense pelvic pain. She has a cystoscopy, and they can't find anything. Her bladder looks normal. And then one day, the pain was really bad, and she had bladder pressure, and she kind of had to push to get her urine out. And when she pushed and she looked in the toilet, there was a string of sutures, black and blue sutures. Now, if you've ever had stitches, you know that when those stitches are cut, it kind of looks like little spider legs. So she had, about an inch long thing of sutures come out of her urine. Just looking at that, going, well, that's weird. That's weird, right? She didn't save it. She flushed accidentally. She goes back to the doctor and they do an MRI and they do a CAT scan. And again, they don't freaking believe her. They don't even believe that she saw the stuff in her urine come out, right? And I should say that after the sutures came out, she felt much better. It's like, dramatically better when she pushed those sutures out. But then a couple months later, bam, it's back. Worse than ever. Goes back to the urologist. Help me. This is agony. What is wrong with me? They do a CAT scan and MRI, whatever they do. Nothing. They find nothing. They literally laugh at her, right? And then it gets so bad, she demands a laparotomy, which is something I demanded too when I was diagnosed. And do you know what they found in her belly? Dozens and dozens and dozens of floating stitches in her abdomen. And they were all covered with tissue, and they were severely inflamed, and they were moving everywhere. So some had moved downwards, some had moved upwards, and they went in there and they were like, where the hell did these stitches come from? And then she remembered after she had her baby, she had a tummy tuck. Like 22 years ago, she had a freaking tummy tuck. And she remembers that a medical student was assisting in that tummy tuck. Normally, these blue polypropylene stitches are only used on the surface. That medical student did them inside of her belly where they never belonged. And, you know, if you've heard about all of the mesh controversy, mesh is composed of polypropylene. And one thing we know about people who've had mesh repair surgeries is that mesh migrates. So if you have had a bladder suspension or a vaginal prolapse repair with mesh, we now know that what starts out as white mesh turns brown. It can have what we call a heterogeneous population of bacteria on it, and it can move. So some mesh has actually sliced across the urethra and into the rectum and through the vagina. Polypropylene is a beast. It is not meant to be inside the human body. And this medical student put polypropylene stitches inside her abdomen when they did the tummy tuck. And one group of polypropylene stitches migrated down through her bladder wall into her bladder, gave her all of the symptoms that we associate with IC: frequency, urgency, pressure, pain, and bam, there you go. Is IC an incurable disease in everybody? Absolutely not. In her case, it was medical malpractice. Should never have happened. And they got a lot of it out, if not most of it out, but she still has some stitches in there that are moving in her belly, and she doesn't know where the hell they're going to go next. So I'm sitting next to her, just my jaw is like going, and my jaw's dropped, right? It's like, oh my God. Because she's not the first patient I've worked with that's had that happen. I had another patient that had that happen too, where she had a stitch perforate through her bladder wall, and it was stuck in her bladder wall when her IC symptoms began, and they persisted and they were intense for about 2 to 3 years. She finally requested a hydrodistension, and what do you know? She's got a freaking stitch through her bladder wall. They pulled the stitch out. Guess what? Symptom free. So it is so incredibly unfair for patients to be told that IC is an incurable bladder disease when it's not. There are so many conditions that can cause all of the symptoms that we associate with IC. And in our magazine, our latest magazine, which is our late winter, early spring, because it's a wee bit 2 weeks late, this is our theme. So we share a couple of patient stories in there, actually about 12 patient stories in here. But let me tell you another one that's in here. So here we have another patient diagnosed with IC, extreme symptoms, getting worse over time. Absolutely no bladder therapies were working for her. Period. Done. Over. She was getting worse. But she, on the other hand, was incredibly smart. And she started looking at the subtyping that we've been talking about now for 3 years. And she was specifically interested in pudendal nerve entrapment, which is IC subtype 4, pudendal nerve entrapment, pudendal neuralgia. So she did a little bit of reading on that and went, gosh, you know what? That really sounds like me. So then she talked to her urologist. Her urologist is like, I don't know. Goes to her OBGYN. He goes, you know what? I think you're right. I think you do have a pudendal nerve entrapment. She had symptoms on both sides of her kind of pelvic area and butt cheeks. But her gynecologist was like, okay, you got it. And we can give you nerve blocks, but we really don't, we really don't have much else to offer you. But he did say, your sacrum is in a really weird position. It's like arched. It's going, there's a big curve in it. Never seen that before. But sent her on her way. She thought, okay, well, that's really odd. Why would my bony structure be out of position? So she went to a chiropractor. And the chiropractor, and I think at some point, you can read about it in our magazine. I mean, I might be getting a few of the minor details incorrect. But anyway, what they did is at some point in time, somebody did a scan of her sacrum. And her sacrum was, and her tailbone area, massively out of position. Massively out of position. And so the chiropractor is the one who worked with her. She went to the chiropractor a lot as they slowly but steadily tried to get the structure back into its proper position. And eventually it worked. And her symptoms improved dramatically. And she had a baby last year. And now, so the way that she protects herself because of this bony structure issue is she gets chiropractic care every couple of months. And that's what keeps her in place, right? So another example where IC absolutely was not a bladder disease, right? Consider a third one. Now, we talked about this in a recent support group meeting because it was some new research that came out. Fibroid tumors in women. And you know what? It's really hot in here. I got to take this off. Excuse me. We're having a weird day where it's very cloudy, but at the same sense, it's warm. So it's a little muggy. Okay. So let us ponder the concept of a fibroid. So for women with IC and women with pelvic pain, if you're somebody where you have very, very painful periods, where you bleed a lot, if your pain is localized, always important to get checked for fibroids. Fibroids are benign masses that can grow inside the bladder, inside the uterine wall. They can protrude into the uterine cavity, see right here, which actually is where fibroids can actually make it difficult to carry a baby because it basically crowds out the baby. Some people can have fibroids that look like pumpkins. I think the biggest fibroid ever removed was something like 140 pounds. But a 60-pound fibroid in the shape of a pumpkin was removed last year in someone. But you can also have a fibroid that grows outside, just connects to the outside of the vagina or the uterine cavity. And this is where we see bladder involvement. Because if you have a giant fibroid pushing on your bladder, it's going to hurt. It's going to cause all sorts of issues. And so we had some researchers did a study of a large number of fibroid patients who also had urinary symptoms. Because it turns out when you have fibroids, you actually tend to have a lot of urinary symptoms. And what they found is when they removed the fibroid, when they got rid of that pressure on the bladder wall, over 60% were cured of their urinary tract symptoms. And I think 80% were dramatically improved, if not cured, right? So again, another perfect example of IC not being a bladder disease, right? So, again, as a support group leader, I always say to patients, you are an anatomical mystery to be solved. I don't want you to walk into any doctor's office and say, I've had IC or I'm diagnosed with IC. I think that's the worst thing you can do. What I want you to do instead is walk in and say, here are my symptoms. Can you please help me understand what structure in my pelvis can trigger those symptoms? I have pain on the left side. What's on the left side that could hurt? Right? Or I have pain externally. What's down there that could hurt? an anatomical mystery to be solved. I don't believe you should say that you have IC for like the first half hour of the appointment. I want them to study your body. Would you please look at my body? Help me understand my anatomy. Help me understand the condition of my anatomy. Are my muscles tight? Are my symptoms suggestive of anything else other than just this, right? So let's take a look at some of the other things that we know can potentially trigger IC. My goal here is to spark you. If you're one of those people where you're just not getting better and you don't know why, let's see if we can find something else that might resonate with you. Maybe you do have a fibroid, but maybe you've got something else. So this is highlighted in an article called What Causes Interstitial Cystitis? How 10 Women Got to the Root of Their Bladder Pain by Susanna Weiss. She allowed me to reprint this in our magazine. I was thrilled to see this in mass media outside of typical urinary media, because it's fascinating. All right. Patient number 1, Hannah, age 23. Her IC symptoms. So here we go. Hannah spent years dealing with recurrent UTIs, yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis. Her pelvic muscles would tighten from pain even after the infections cleared up. After doctors were unable to alleviate her symptoms, she found her way to a physical therapist. After 2 years of physical therapy, she describes herself as 90% better. You know, patients get stuck in what I call the chicken versus the egg dilemma. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? For us, it's which comes first, the bladder or the pelvic floor? For some people, IC begins after a bladder wall injury like chemotherapy. And here you've got the bladder screaming in pain. And what happens? So here's your bladder screaming in pain. You've got this nice, normally loose pelvic floor. I mean, you know, comfortable pelvic floor. It reacts to pain by getting tight. It's called the guarding reflex. You cannot turn that off. That is involuntary. So you got some patients who have a bladder injury and the muscles get tight here. Our therapeutic priority for these patients is to calm the bladder. If we calm the bladder, the pain should reduce and the muscles should release. But there are moments when we might calm the bladder, but the muscles are still tight. And if they are still tight, we got to work on those muscles. We've got to get those muscles to release. You know, it's really interesting. I've worked with some patients who their muscles have been tight for 20 years, 20 years or longer. And they think that 6 weeks of physical therapy are going to fix it. And the answer is, hell no, it's not going to fix it, because you got 20 years of dysfunction to correct. And it's about being persistent. It's about doing your work. It's about working with a physical therapist, doing your homework, trying to figure out if you've got one weak muscle, then you've got one tight muscle. There's a whole compensation thing happening that also screws everything up, right? All right. Now, there's that other group of patients whose symptoms begin after a muscle trauma, like having a baby or a car accident or a fall or a long car ride or a rape or sexual abuse, or a history of athletics. So for these patients, you got a nice healthy bladder, but you've got muscles that over time get damaged and they get weaker and weaker and weaker. And when they're weak, they overcompensate and they get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. So here we've got tight pelvic floor muscles compressing a normal bladder as well as other structures. Tight pelvic floor muscles are damaging, because what do? They restrict blood flow and they impact nerves. So if I do this, and again, you know, I've got my light here. So if I squeeze here, you notice all the blood flow goes away from my skin, and it takes a couple of seconds for the blood flow to come back, right? Bam. Bladder, tight pelvic floor muscle, squeezing. It's very hard for the bladder to be healthy when it is being deprived of good blood flow. You're not getting good nourishment. So for these patients, what we're going to see is, of course, you have no clue that you have a muscle problem. Your first symptom is frequency urgency. You think you have infection, right? You call the doctor. In fact, another patient last week, this is exactly what happened to her. She thought she had an infection, called the doctor, got antibiotics. They did not work. And she took antibiotics for months and they did not work. Went back to the doctor. And remember, here's our situation. This is her situation. Antibiotics don't work. They throw her on overactive bladder meds. Those don't work. They throw her on IC meds like Elmeron. Those don't work. She will never get better on bladder meds because that is not her problem, because her problem is tight freaking muscles. We have to reduce, relax, and restore normal muscle tone so that we can restore blood flow. And when the bladder gets the blood flow, the bladder starts to heal, right? So for this group of patients, our therapeutic priority is muscle work. We've got to restore blood flow by reducing tension in those muscles, right? So Hannah is an example of one of those. And again, that's IC subtype 3, pelvic floor dysfunction, is now considered to be the largest subtype. We think the majority of IC patients actually have pelvic floor dysfunction as their underlying issue. Okay. All right, let's go to the next patient story, Tabitha. Tabitha, age 24, had to take 4 to 5 Urabil pills a day to alleviate her IC pain. Didn't work. She had severe period pain. She had pain with intimacy. She didn't understand how the two conditions were connected. And then bam, after a laparoscopy, what did they find? Endometriosis. She had endo. So she had to get the endometriosis treated. So again, and I think they have a quote here. Let's see here. So let's see here. We have a quote from a doctor here. If there is inflammation anywhere in the pelvis due to a case of endometriosis, it is likely that the inflammatory cytokines, which are molecules which signal inflammation, will be close enough to the vicinity to affect the bladder and or vice versa, Dr. Rafataj says. In some cases, endometriosis can enter the bladder. Endometriosis is not limited to the uterus, and although rare, it can infiltrate the lining of the bladder. This can worsen the symptoms of IC. Endometriosis should be ruled out in cases of IC and vice versa because many times they are linked. So again, for those of you who have endo, bam, that's something we've got to look at. Here, let me get a drink of water here. All right. Our next case is Megan, age 45. She had the worst case of IC. According to the nurse that did her cysto, she went on Elmeron, a medication aimed at rebuilding her bladder lining, which helped a bit, but drained her wallet, as we all know. Then she began seeing a naturopath. And what they found is that she had leaky gut, as well as some fruit intolerance, which I think is really interesting. I haven't really seen a lot of fruit intolerance. After she stopped doing what she was intolerant to and went on a specific diet, her IC symptoms went away completely. She said the explanation seemed too simple to be true, but whenever she ate fruit, it would start to come back. Quote, I had success putting my IC into remission because I addressed my leaky gut through a wellness diet designed to regenerate the epithelial cells that line the gut. Secondly, I pulled out a whole food group that my body wasn't able to digest well. I continue to treat my gut with gentleness, and my diet is one of great intentionality. So in her case, she was having a lot of gut issues too. And we know that IC patients tend to have gut issues. I don't know if you remember, the MAP Research Network, the federally funded MAP Research Network, made a really remarkable discovery about 4 or 5 years ago. They found that IC patients had, as a whole, had an unusual gut biome, that we were deficient in some important bacteria and we had an overabundance of some bad bacteria. One of the bacteria that some of us were deficient in is a bacteria that provides food that nourishes the cells lining the gut. You know, you got to remember, we have got 1 trillion bacteria in our body. We rely on bacteria to survive. Bacteria are good. They are not bad. We need bacteria to digest food and do all sorts of things. One of the species of bacteria actually produces the food that nourishes the cells lining the gut. So what happens when you take an antibiotic? You kill it. You kill that bacteria. And when you kill that bacteria, guess what? The cell lining your gut might die because it's not getting the food it needs because of the overuse of antibiotics. So here is a patient who was, once she addressed her gut issues, her bladder symptoms disappeared. And this is something that my sister, you know, IC runs in our family. My sister has it, my mother, my grandmother. My sister right now is going through some really bad gut problems. She just had her gallbladder out last week, really trying to understand why she is reacting to so many foods. And what we're dealing with in her case, I think, is a really interesting case of gut dysbiosis. All right, here's our next one. Our next patient, Candida. Now, you might remember 4 years ago, the MAP Research Network, again, the National Institutes Health arm, the Studying IC, mega $1 million budget, put hundreds of, I don't know, maybe $200 million into the study of IC. They're the ones using next generation DNA testing. And guess what they found? In some patients, they have an overgrowth of Candida in their urine when they flare. When they flare, during flares, like I had. I've had a yeast infection for a month. Hopefully, we're finally over the end of it. So here is Laura, age 51, whose IC symptoms were actually caused by an overgrowth of Candida. Now, if you were paying attention to the health news yesterday, there was an absolutely chilling new, in fact, I linked it on our Twitter page, a new study about a brand new drug-resistant Candida infection that is sweeping the world and is killing patients. In fact, the Center for Disease Control a couple of years ago, in their top 10 microbial threats, drug-resistant threats, their top 10 list, you would think it's all bacteria, but it's not. Candida's in there. Patients in hospitals get systemic Candida that can kill them. So why do we have such an overgrowth of Candida? Well, number one, the massive overuse of antibiotics in food, in meat products. What do they say? 90 to 95% of the antibiotics that are produced are actually given to animals instead of us, where they create super biological factories, for lack of a better term, that can sort out antibiotics. But the study that came out yesterday talked also about now the massive overuse of antifungals in food. They are spraying our crops with antifungals like nobody, in massive quantities, which is yet another reason why I think it's very important to buy organic fruits and vegetables or grow your own. So our own National Institutes of Health says that some IC patients during flares have fungal infections. The problem is you have no clue because the symptoms are the same. Frequency, urgency, pressure, pain, right? So how do you know if you have a fungal infection? The only way to know is with a next generation DNA urine test. What this test does, you send your urine to the company, and they don't grow it out on anything. They look for DNA fragments. And they will tell you all of the good bacteria, all of the bad bacteria, and any fungus in your urine. Any fungus in your urine, right? And guys, listen, I know you're asking lots of questions. I got to get through my content before I can go to your questions already. So just bear with me here. So if you, gosh, the challenge with, I had a drug-resistant Candida glabrata infection from taking Augmentin for 6 months for my IC 20 years ago. It took us 2 years to kill it. I am not lying. That was a beast of an infection. I did massive amounts of diflucan, 450 milligrams a day, 7 days a week. 7 days a week. I think I did that 5 or 6 times over that period of 2 years. They painted my tender bits with gentian violet. I used nystatin. I used everything that I could have used. And it took us, and I think ultimately in the end, I learned that anytime I ate anything with milk sugar in it, it flared because yeast have to eat and they love milk sugar. And so they're a beast to handle. And what triggered my current yeast infection is I was putting hot microwavable heating pads under the covers when I went to bed at night. And it just kind of dawned on me, oh my God, Jill, how could you be so stupid? And I did it every day for every night for like 2 months. And then I started getting the pricklies, but I never had a discharge. Many Candida infections, there's no vaginal discharge. You have no clue you have an infection. None at all. So something else to rule out. The cool thing about the next generation urine test is you can order it yourself. In 25 states, you can order it and you do not need to have a doctor's test. And why not? If you're not getting better and you're trying to understand your body, this might be really interesting. I don't like guesses. And if you've suffered for a long time and nobody's given you any clue, it is time to look outside the box. The data from this test alone would be absolutely fascinating to see if you've got anything interesting of a microbial nature going on in your urine that a typical urine test is not going to find. And it turns out that typical urinalysis cultures really do not isolate the vast majority of bacteria that can be found in your bladder anyway. And it certainly does not identify fungus or viruses. Because, of course, now we know that patients can have a virus in their bladder. That's been a Epstein-Barr, polyoma BK, HPV, have been all associated, not HPV, but polyoma BK and Epstein-Barr have now been associated with Hunner's lesions. All right, here we go. So Candida, worth ruling out. Let's go to the next one. Dana, age 53. After a year and a half of being diagnosed with IC while also suffering from a number of autoimmune conditions, Dana cut herself and got infected. After taking antibiotics, her seemingly unrelated symptoms, including the bladder ones, were alleviated. Her doctor recognized this as a sign of Lyme disease. Because Lyme can affect any tissue in the body, the bladder is sometimes where it lands. Kristen Raymond, MD, family medicine doctor and author of Life After Lyme, tells. It can also be a result of it affecting the nerves that innervate the bladder. The connection between Lyme and IC is so significant. They actually quote me in this article, which is great. It is certainly reasonable to request a test for Lyme disease if you have been bitten by a tick, and even if you hadn't. Why not? Rule it the hell out. Rule it out. All right, our next patient, our next potential cause of IC-like symptoms is Denise, age 45, with food intolerance. And her story is very interesting. Denise spent years struggling with IC until she remembered the soy intolerance she had had since she was little. While researching soy, she found that though she'd cut soy sauce and tofu out of her diet, soy was in a lot of processed foods as well. When I cut it out, my bladder was 100% improved, she says. Even sex was no longer painful. Her 21-year-old daughter, Riley, who also has IC, has experienced less bladder pain since she stopped eating soy. Certain foods are known to irritate the bladder. However, on top of some foods and drinks being bladder irritants, individual food intolerance can also contribute to IC. Quote, if someone is eating foods that cause an inflammatory reaction in their body, then it's possible that IC could be caused, according to this doctor that was quoted. Some foods that commonly cause inflammation in people are wheat, gluten, cow's milk, casein, and refined sugar. Alcohol can also be associated with bladder inflammation and IC. So on the England has an organization called the IBS Network, which is I am quite flattered by. And their Twitter feed is lovely. And this morning they had a Twitter feed of what are the nightmare foods for an IBS patient. And it's so different. For some people, it's onions and garlic, which I can eat like a beast. For others, it's oatmeal, which I cannot eat, and chocolate, which I cannot eat. It's so interesting looking at the different food issues that some people have. So if you're one of those people where you struggle with a lot of really weird food intolerances, having a food sensitivity test is called an ALCAT test, ALCAT, would be really interesting. Wish I could have done it. Would have saved me years of suffering in my 20s when it all hit. Who knew that the food my doctor told me to eat every day when I started having bowel issues was the food that was the problem, oatmeal. Within 24 hours of not eating oatmeal, my symptoms improved dramatically. Okay, so let's look at food intolerances. If you have issues with foods, let's figure it out. Because if you're eating that food that triggers an inflammatory reaction, that can irritate your bladder. Okay? Kimberly, age 40. Chemical sensitivities. Could you be having a chemical reaction? Oh, hell yeah. Okay. When Kimberly's doctor told her she'd have to deal with IC forever, she refused to take that as an answer. Through her own research, she read that chemicals like nitrates, sulfites, food dyes, cigarette smoke, paints, and lacquers can contribute to bladder issues. She went on an elimination diet and avoided the chemicals that bothered her bladder. Now she's symptom-free except for the occasional flare when she's exposed to chemicals. Quote, if someone is eating, drinking, or exposed to toxic chemicals that cause inflammation in their body, then this can certainly cause IC. You can think of it as an allergic reaction. While some people are allergic to pollen and as a response become inflamed in their nasal passages and eyes, these people are mounting an allergic type response to various other things like nitrates and sulfites and dyes and smoke and paints, which can cause them to become inflamed in their bladder. Okay? So people, seriously, get rid of chemicals in your home. We have a whole section on our website that talks about that because we've been talking about that for years now. Chemical sensitivity is really common in this community. So this means no Febreze. It means no Glade plugins. It means no air freshener. It means no cigarette smoke. It means no scented candles from China, which are filled with carcinogens. We got to clean it up here. We got to clean it up. These chemical companies are killing us and killing this planet with what they're doing right now. And I have 2 chemistry degrees, and I am ashamed of the chemical industry and what they are doing right now and what they're getting away with. All right. So let's rule out chemical stuff. Clean it up in your home. Alexis, age 24, autoimmune disease. So in her case, Alexis has something else I have. She's got gastroparesis and Sjogren's, which I have. I also have gastroparesis and Sjogren's, an autoimmune disorder where the immune system attacks the glands that produce saliva and tears. Through her own research, she learned that Sjogren's could cause both gastroparesis and IC. Quote, this is from the doctor, the immune system should normally be involved in defending ourselves from invaders, but when it's not functioning properly, the immune system can actually attack our bodies. If the immune system is causing an inflammatory reaction in the bladder, then the symptoms of IC would be inevitable. There are several reports of Sjogren's patients suffering from IC in scientific literature. people with IC are 30 times more likely as the rest of the population to have systemic lupus. Although I think we have to look at it the other way. Look at it the other way. Some of us have some autoimmune issues, and we need to address that. And we have to try to figure out why. And again, I still think the quality of the food, the quality of our environment is critically important here. All right, the next one, Lauren, age 35. So remember the whole concept of, hey, IC is an incurable bladder disease. There are some patients out there who have chronic UTI. You might not have a pathogenic UTI. You might not have a giant UTI, and what we call an acute UTI, rather, where you're screaming in pain. For some people, they can have a very small fastidious infection, a chronic infection that would not culture out normally, but is present enough that it can be triggering some of their symptoms. And again, this next generation urine test, bladderhealth.org, would help us figure out if you perhaps are one of those people where you might have a chronic infection. Now, is this a big subset in the IC patient community? I don't think it is. I think it's a really small subset, but it's possible. It's possible. And I've always believed it was possible. The challenge is, how do you treat it? How do you treat a chronic infection? We know that the overuse of antibiotics is damaging our biome, and chronic UTI advocates are saying you've got to take antibiotics for a long period of time. And so it's like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You know, you're damaging one system to help another system. You help the other system, but then this system's profoundly damaged. You end up with autoimmune issues, right? What we're going to see in the future is UTIs and infections being treated with the right combination of beneficial bacteria. You know, you have to understand that your biome is this incredibly diverse community of bacteria that work together to keep our system in balance. The good bacteria keep the bad bacteria in check. The good bacteria keep the fungus in check. When you kill the good bacteria, then you're allowing the bad bacteria to prosper, and you're allowing the fungus to prosper. So what we're going to see in the future is we're going to be seeing more of things like fecal transplant. Fecal transplants, where you're taking a small quantity of feces from somebody with a completely healthy, good, normal biome and putting it in a compromised biome. You're introducing the good bacteria. You're going to see that for the bladder sooner rather than later. And in fact, the new bladder supplement that should arrive on our shelves soon, Bladder Builder, actually is going to have beneficial bacteria, beneficial probiotics specific to the urinary tract in there, right? And then we have Caitlin. Caitlin, who is age 28, and her symptoms are the result of the overuse of antibiotics. And so this is what they said: gut dysbiosis. Gut dysbiosis is a state of imbalance in your microbiome, which usually means that you have too many harmful bacteria and not enough beneficial ones. This can lead to bacterial overgrowth in the bacteria, which may or may not turn into a full-blown infection, but can certainly cause IC symptoms. Caitlin learned she had dysbiosis via a stool test and got to work healing her gut via dietary changes, antimicrobials and supplements, nervous system retraining, and Cambo. And I have no idea what Cambo is. She's now free from significant symptoms except for the occasional flare. So here's what the doctor said. The majority of our microbes live within our gut, about 6 pounds worth. If someone has been taking antibiotics frequently or sometimes daily, then I can assume that they have dysbiosis and most likely fungal overgrowth, which will perpetuate this inflammatory cycle. I would first try to understand why this person's microbiome is imbalanced, and then start to treat that with the hopes that the IC would resolve. How many of you, I continue to say, if there is one patient population that has been exposed to massive amounts of antibiotics, it is us. It's the lower urinary tract patients. Man, when I was a kid, Are you kidding? I can remember them giving me 16 sulfa pills to swallow once. I'm not lying. Every time I had a urethral dilation, because obviously I had symptoms from the time I was a kid, they gave me antibiotics. Man, and a lot of you out there, you got old antibiotics in your bedside table. And whenever you have a flare, what do? Bam, you pop it. I'll tell you, I haven't taken antibiotics in years now. Luckily, I got a degree in pharmacology, you know, and I learned that, hey, there are consequences to taking antibiotics. So I probably taken antibiotics maybe 3 times in 20 years now, 25 years. I even got it last month in January for this terrible cold. Didn't take it. It's very important that you not self-medicate with antibiotics because, you know, for God's sake, if you think you've got a urinary tract infection, at least do this first. If you're having a flare, do this first. An azo test strip. And what you do is you pee on a stick. Let's see if I got one in here. Normally, I have a demo. Not that I'm going to demo peeing on a stick for you guys. I could, though. I have no shame. I actually probably would do that. All right. Take my cell phone into the bathroom? No. All right. So here we go. So here's your stick, right? You're going to pee on this stick. And it's got 2 pads up at the top. One for leukocytes, one for nitrates. Or nitrites. Nitrates. Sorry. Nitrates. Right? If you have a double positive, both pads turn color, you got infection. You need to call the doctor, go leave a urine sample, do a next generation test. Antibiotics completely potentially appropriate in that circumstance, depending upon how severe it is. You know, remember, untreated antibiotics can progress. I mean, untreated infections can progress up the ureters into the kidneys where they can cause kidney infection and even become fatal. So if you've got a real infection and you've got severe symptoms and you've got a fever and you've got the chills, for God's sake, get your butt to the doctor, leave a sample, get them tested. But if you've got a mild flare where you got up 4 times last night, I wonder if I have infection. Maybe I should take antibiotics. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. So the title of that article is What's the Cause of IC? And you can't look at it that way. Remember, we don't think of IC as an incurable bladder disease. We think of it as a syndrome. There are many conditions that can trigger lower urinary tract symptoms, from a muscle injury to a floating stitch that's penetrated the bladder, to mesh that has penetrated the bladder, to muscle injury, to muscle tear, to a fungal infection, to a viral infection, to a low-grade bladder infection, to genetics. If you come on over to our website, I have a video series called the Living with IC video series. I would really love it if you watch the first video, the 5 subtypes of IC. You know, I mean, this is really what doctors and researchers have been doing now for the last decade, is we're trying to understand these unique variants. And this is where Facebook fails. Facebook fails because support groups are not respecting the fact that patients can be dramatically different, or support group members. As an example, we have one patient that I've worked with who, unfortunately, really, really severe symptoms. I mean, I don't know if she's in here or not. If you are, hun, you know who I'm talking to, because you live 10 miles from Dr. Robert Eckenberg's office. So you know who you are. And her symptoms were so disabling. She was literally laying in bed and was on Facebook all day. Wasn't even watching TV. Wasn't getting out of the house. Barely going to the doctor. And the Facebook groups kept giving her bladder stuff after bladder stuff after bladder stuff after bladder stuff. Nothing worked for her. You know why? Because it wasn't her bladder. She's got a pudendal nerve entrapment. She needs muscle therapy. And whoever it was who was in that group who was talking to her condemned her to suffer by not giving her the full information. Now she has the full information. Now she has a direction to go that actually might help. But Elmiron is not going to help a pudendal nerve entrapment. Diet is not going to help a pudendal nerve entrapment, et cetera, my friends. So it is very important that we all respect the fact that IC is a syndrome and there is variety. And your number one job is to solve your you are an anatomical mystery to be solved. We've got to study your body and not just your pelvic symptoms, your other symptoms. You got gastroparesis, you got stomach issues. Are you farting a lot? Are you belching a lot? Do you have painful periods? Do you bleed profusely? Those are all relevant facts here. All relevant facts. So my hope with this, and I usually don't talk this long with an educational stuff, but I just think it's so important, is I want to spark an idea in you. I want you to pay attention to the weird things that you're going through and start tracking them. The weird things you never tell your doctor, like you eat garlic and your stomach hurts, or when you sit for too long, your butt starts vibrating, or when you have your period, it is 5 days of hell. Right? You need to track those. Those are all important pieces of the puzzle. This next thing I want you to do is, for God's sake, clean up your food. Do not trust food from China at all. I refuse to eat anything from China. Period. Done. Over. I won't do it. They have caught companies they can call a produce organic in China, even if it's grown in soil that has massive heavy metal contamination. I won't take a pill from China. I will do everything I can to avoid anything from China. Also, pay attention to the environmental working groups. Dirty Dozen. I don't know if you know that. Environmental Working Group is an organization which tracks FDA testing of pesticide contamination. So they're not doing the testing. They're actually going over, oh my God. Oh God. I thought I just disconnected YouTube. Woo! Okay. Anyway, the Environmental Working Group every year releases a list of the foods that are known to contain the highest levels of pesticides. You gotta really pay attention to this. And so let me find it for 2019. I know that the most contaminated food is strawberries. Here, hold on a sec. I gotta find it. Let's see. Dirty Dozen 2019. Here it is. All right. Here it is. Oh, come on. Just guys, why is it? Why are you making it so hard for me to see this? All right. So these are the foods you should only eat organic because they are so massively contaminated with pesticides and fungicides. Number one, strawberries. Absolutely the worst. Spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes, right? Get them organic. If you go to a farmer's market, ask them if they spray, right? The safer foods, the foods that you can buy Non-organic are number one, avocados, although ironically we have an E. coli or Listeria avocado recall right now in California. Go figure. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, sweet peas, onions, papayas, eggplants, asparagus, kiwis, cabbage, cauliflower, cantaloupes, broccoli, mushrooms, honeydew. Okay. EWG.org, environmentalworkinggroup.org. I rely on their website not only for me to pick the foods that I want to eat, but also household chemicals and makeup and soaps and all that sort of stuff. They're the ones that will really tell you if these foods contain chemicals or not. All right. Okay. So tell you what, let me get off of my high horse here. And I think it's time to take some questions. I hope that you found that helpful. I really, really do. I can't wait to get emails from some people who say, "Oh my God, you found it! Oh! And I got another announcement. I've got another announcement." So for those of you who get our e-newsletter, I announced another update on the Elmiron Eye research, and that is that the Emory Eye Center, which is a center which discovered that patients taking Elmiron it has been associated with what we call retinal pigmentary maculopathy of the retina, right? And I can go into that more if anybody has a question about that. They've got more papers, more patient stories coming up. They're launching a national trial among retinal specialists around the country, if not around the world. I personally have ophthalmologists calling us, who I'm sending to them. We are getting new patients. I see patients who have taken Elmiron who are being diagnosed with this. The FDA accepted my citizens petition demanding that the labeling of Elmiron be changed to provide a warning about eye disease and suggesting that patients have eye exams every year if you are taking Elmiron. But I need you to comment on it. I need you to go to the FDA website and provide a comment in support of my citizens petition to make that happen. And there is a link to that in our e-blast that went out last night. And I will be putting it on our Facebook page through Twitter and everything tomorrow. All right. So please think about that. All right. I got a lot of questions by email. And so let us take some of those questions here. All right, and you guys, for the people who send the questions by email, I'm not gonna say your name because the assumption is that you want some privacy. So I have a question. I was diagnosed with IC by hydrodissension 25 years ago, not the low pressure type. My bladder looked bad, but not Hunner's lesions, hormonal changes or remissions till my mid 40s. I'm now 49. Symptoms came back with a vengeance. Doctor put me on Elmiron. Switched doctors, new doc did low pressure distension, checked my voiding. I was sedated. His diagnosis is that I'm not peeing correctly and that's contributing to my pain. He asked me peeing with my legs spread wide to completely empty. And he is addressing my bowel habits. He said, I don't have IC because my bladder looks fine. You just have an irritated neck of the bladder. This way of peeing has helped, but not 100% pee. Okay, she says, what are my thoughts on that? Muscle dysfunction is real. It can go back to potty training. It can go back to some parents beating children for wetting the bed. And what do? If you're one of those kids, is you start holding your pelvic floor subconsciously so you won't leak. And 25 years later, 30 years later, that is a really effed up pelvic floor. So what's interesting about her question is that her bladder looks good. And so I think that that's great news, because that tells us that her bladder wall is probably not the source of her issue. It looks like it's some sort of weird muscle dysfunction instead. Who knows why? I was working with a patient again a couple days ago, and what was that? She'd had something like, she had 2 hernia repair. I think, let's see, hold on. I want to get this correct. She'd had hernia repairs when she was a kid on both sides of her pelvic floor. And then she had several C-sections. She had several C-sections, and clearly, and her muscles were really, really, really tight. So I think that this is kind of the same situation. So it's going to be very interesting to see, how retraining those muscles work. You'd be surprised. You might be surprised. I would definitely give that a try. But at the same time, I would also want to be working with a really good pelvic floor physical therapist, and also protecting your bladder. You're 49 years old now. You're entering perimenopause. You're not going to have as much estrogen. Therefore, your bladder wall is going to be more vulnerable. So not the time to be doing green tea and black tea and soda and stuff like that. But anyway, there you go. All right, let's go to the next question. Is a UTI, and obviously, guys, I haven't read these infections, so you're going to, I haven't read these questions so that you're going to hear them as I read them, okay? Okay. Is a UTI infection that was not properly treated and became protected in a biofilm a primary cause? My family determined many years ago that I had a, quote, hot bladder infection. Without a culture, he prescribed Keflex as he said it would take care of everything. It didn't, so he prescribed it again, thinking more was needed. It never went away. It was diagnosed many years later at the University of Michigan as a classic form of IC. I recently read that biofilms can disintegrate and you will find tiny bits of white in the toilet, which is the biofilm. No, that's not true. But you can't see biofilms. What you're probably seeing is tissue. I did see exactly this about 6 months ago with the toilet bowl of urine completely filled with tiny white dots filling it. You guys, I had no idea what this was until I read about what can happen with biofilms. Also, I didn't know what it was at the time. I did nothing. Is this a time to treat the bladder where treatment would be effective? I'm also wondering if some supplements I take could have resulted in this. Do you have any information on biofilms and the part that they play in treatment? All right, seriously, people, this is what you do. You get a next generation urine test. This test is going to be much more effective at detecting biofilm-based infections. If you don't know what a biofilm is, it's really interesting. Nature is a miracle. Nature is a miracle. No matter how hard we try as humans, we are never going to outguess nature. Nature, the majesty and miracle of life is undeniable. So it turns out that to survive, bacteria congregate. They congregate. And it's not always the same bacteria. Actually, biofilms are usually what we call heterogeneous bacteria. When they actually look at a biofilm, and what they find are many, many different types of bacteria living together harmoniously. And they even, I read this about 6 months ago, they're even organized based upon the type of bacteria, that you've got some bacteria in the center, and then you've got some bacteria that are in the fringes, and there's a real structure, almost like a snowflake or a crystalline structure that you can see with bacterial formation inside biofilms. Biofilms are protected because together they excrete a waxy coating that protects them. Antibiotics cannot penetrate into the biofilm. We also know that biofilms move. They migrate. And so we now know why many patients get bladder infections after having cystoscopies, because they move up the instrument. They can move up catheters from outside of the body, up the catheter into the human body. We also know biofilms are impervious to autoclaving. You cannot heat sterilize them. They will survive that. So a biofilm is a perfect example of nature outwitting humanity in this respect. The question is it a pathogenic biofilm, or is it normal? Is it normal? The challenge when you do a next generation test is, like when I did mine last year after my hysterectomy, I wanted to know why my urine was cloudy. I wasn't having any symptoms, but my urine was cloudy, and I was very interested in why. And what it found was that I had a little tiny population of E. coli and a little tiny population of actinomyces, which is a little freaky. I don't like that bacteria. But because I was not symptomatic, I decided not to take antibiotics because I did not want to destroy everything else. Instead, my focus was on trying to improve my health, eating better, trying to restore my biome to hopefully control those populations. You know, there is a chance that a small population of E. coli is normal in the bladder. And this is really the cutting edge future of research right now, trying to identify what we call the urinary biome. So let's see. So to this person who emailed me, if you think you've got a biome infection, you cannot rely on a guess, not only with respect to the type of, if you have biome, what the type of bacteria is, but also how to treat it. For goodness sake, you got to get the next generation test, and that will tell you at least what's in your bladder, and then you can have a really good, solid discussion with your doctor about what to do. There are biome busters now that have been used and are more effective at breaking through biofilms to a certain degree. But again, I really think this is a tiny, tiny, tiny population of the overall IC patient population. All right, we have another question here. Does IC have anything to do with systemic yeast imbalance in the whole body? Yes. Yeah, it could, certainly. You can have a fungal infection in your bladder, no doubt about it. I've been dealing with a fungal infection down there for a month now, and in addition to doing the diflucan and the nystatin and the over-the-counter stuff that they wanted me to try that didn't do anything, the most important thing that I did is I stopped sugar. I stopped feeding the yeast, especially dairy. I haven't eaten dairy for a month, and I'm much, much better. You know, I always found that whenever I had candida, my bladder screamed. It was so much worse. You know, a fungal infection in the bladder is much worse to me than a bladder infection in the bladder. The pain was insane. And I will say, you know, when I went to the, I've been to the OBGYN 3 times now in the month to try to deal with this, because I was hoping that I was not going down my 2-year odyssey of this Candida glabrata resistant infection. I have had doctors yell at me, literally yell at me when I went in crying with a yeast infection. I had one doctor she yelled at me and said, "You are lying. There is no way you could have yeast if you have taken diflucan." And my answer was, "Prove it, do a swab." She did a swab. She came back. She goes, "Oh my God, you have yeast." It's like, yeah, hun, I wouldn't be here if I weren't in pain. Seriously, I'm not going to the doctor because I enjoy being here and taunting you. I am here because I am asking for your help. And that's what I actually said to the last one I saw, which was a new one. The first one said he saw yeast. I thought it had gotten better, and then I made the mistake of having a little bit of sugar. It flared again last week. Went back, and she did a swab this time, and she did not find a lot of yeast. And thankfully, the symptoms have improved. Okay. Debbie. I said her name, but there's lots of Debbies out there. Okay, so I'm sorry. She says that she is taking Ativan and that it has improved her IC by 90%. But when she stopped the Ativan, it flared right back up. So she's staying with the Ativan, and she wants to know if anybody else has had a similar experience. It's interesting. Remember, so Ativan is for sleep and anxiety. So number one, we would look at the quality and health of your sleep, because your body heals when you're sleeping well. So if it's helping you sleep, then we know good healing is happening. But we also know the bladder can be triggered by high periods of anxiety. And so if it's helping you control your anxiety, power to you, girl. Okay. I'm going to come to your live questions here, and then I'll go back to the ones that were emailed, because we've got quite a discussion happening here on YouTube. Let's see here. I love you guys. I love the way you support each other. Sarah says, do we know what causes IC yet? Sarah, you got to watch the beginning of this when it's on, because there are many, many potential causes. Sarah, as she says, she was given antibiotics once a month for 20 years. Holy moly, girl. Be very, very interesting to do your next generation test. And hopefully you're working on restoring your biome, because, you know, that 20 years worth of antibiotics is certainly very damaging over time. Sarah also had a potassium sensitivity test, which is an old diagnostic test, really not done anymore. It said she held it for an hour, and then when you peed it out, it was the worst burning pain you've ever had in your life. Yeah, potassium sensitivity we really don't do for diagnostic purposes anymore, because it does hurt so much. Instead, we can do an anesthetic cocktail to numb your bladder. If that turns your pain off, then we're gold, because that proves that it's coming from your bladder wall. Some, thank you on YouTube, hon. You're really doing a good job repeating what I've said. Christina says, your first installation was done by a nurse with a larger catheter. Pain was extreme. Told your urologist she did it herself the second time with a pediatric catheter. Much better. Yes, people. Always ask for a pediatric catheter when you're having a bladder treatment. Remember, your urethra is about the size of your little finger, right? Maybe a little smaller than that with respect to, you know, the diameter. But if you put something big in it, like a big red rubber catheter, you're stretching it, it's going to hurt. And unfortunately, the lidocaine gel that they normally put inside your urethra to kind of numb it, I think it's been discontinued. And so a lot of people do not have that lidocaine gel anymore. So if you're going to be catheterized, always ask for a tiny catheter, pediatric catheter, 8 to 10 French size, rather than going for an 18 to 20 French. And that will reduce some of that superficial trauma to your urethra when you are having a bladder installation. Sarah says her urologist was considered the best urologist in Georgia. He was very mean, said if I didn't want to take Elmeron, then what was the point of me being there, and that he couldn't do anything for me. Sarah, you could do a pelvic floor assessment. I mean, you've got the whole AUA guidelines. We have a 6-step treatment protocol. We've got subtypes. There are so many things you could do. I would, you know what I would do is, I would, number one, come to our website, watch the 5 subtypes of IC video series, then watch the 6 steps of treatment video so that you know the many, many treatments. But even more so, I think it would be really, really prudent for you to go read the American Urology Association guidelines for IC. Because that way you'll know the research, and I can promise you he might have skimmed it, but he probably hasn't read it. And if you walk in with that knowledge, you're going to kick his you know what in a good way. I don't ever want anybody to be aggressive with your doctor. I mean, I will tell you that 99.9% of the doctors working with IC sincerely want to help you. But there are some doctors, especially doctors in the South, who are kind of up on a pedestal, and they really don't like patients asking them questions. They get very frustrated with that. And if you have a doctor who doesn't want to answer your questions, that's kind of when you maybe want to look elsewhere. Larry's had 3 years of hell with no help in sight. The last year has been the worst. Larry, you guys, listen, I'm always available by phone. I mean, I'm getting a lot of phone calls now. You're always welcome to give us a phone call. You can find me at the support extension, 800-928-7496. Just know if you get me, you're gold. If you don't get me, it means I'm working with another patient. Leave a message. I will call you back. I try to call back within 24 hours, sometimes sooner, sometimes later. Also know that I tend to call back at night because I tend to do most of my phone calls after 3 o'clock Pacific time, which is 6 o'clock Eastern time. So if you do call and you're on the East Coast, be prepared for a phone call after dinner because that's still working time for me. All right. Man, you guys are kicking it on YouTube. Good job. All right, let's go to Facebook. Let's see what's happening over on Facebook here. Now, you guys, Facebook scrolls through, and sometimes I can scroll back, and sometimes I can't. Leanne says, what do you think of bladder removal? Bladder removal is only done if you have ruled everything else out and you have tried every freaking treatment on the planet, okay? It's rarely done in IC. It is only done if a bladder is very, very badly damaged and or if it is shrunk to like the size of a walnut. There are some people who do have their bladders removed. We have a bladder support group on our website. Remember, 3 to 8 million women in the United States, 1 to 4 million men in the United States have symptoms of IC. In that population, we're talking, I can't even give you a number, a tiny fraction of it, 1%, might get to the point where they need bladder removal, usually from scar tissue or something else that's going on. So I would really, 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 please call me and let's go through your stuff and let's try subtyping and let's look at all the other therapies before you ever walk down that pathway, all right? Thank you, Terry. Terry says, I'm always helpful and thanks for going into detail. And some of you get annoyed because I give you long answers, but I have to give you my answers. So Libby says, I've been told I have IC for the last 8 months. My urinary symptoms are burning in frequency. All my symptoms started when I took a 2-week course of Augmentin for SIBO. I've seen 3 urologists and no one knows how to help me. Should I see a different specialist? No, you should have a next generation test. Let's do a next generation test. You might have taken the Augmentin for your small intestine issue, but you might have now created an issue with your bladder with the use of Augmentin. Augmentin is a really powerful antibiotic. And you could have a candida infection from that. I would want to do a more aggressive test to see what might be going on there, Libby, to be quite honest. And yeah, if you want to go see another doctor, absolutely go see another doctor. There comes a time when your case is so complex, you need to go see a national specialist. Please go see a national specialist. If you're on the East Coast, you're going to go see Robert Molden up in New York, Robert Evans in North Carolina at Wake Forest. If you're in the Midwest, it's going to be Ken Peters at Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak, Michigan. If you're on the West Coast, it's going to be Chris Payne at Vista Urology, Phil Hanno at Stanford, and there are some other doctors around the country too who are good. But if your case is really, 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 really complex and you're just not getting better, 15 minutes with Robert Evans would probably give you more than 5 years worth of a local doctor who's never taken a class on IC. You got to remember, the guys at the top are cutting edge researchers who write, who are contributing to the diagnostic and the treatment guidelines. The little local doctors over in Podunk, USA, haven't been to a urology conference in 25 years. Their only treatment for IC is Elmeron and DMSO. You're not going to get far with them. They don't know. That's why you become the educator. You got to read the AUA guidelines. You got to print out 3 copies of the AUA guidelines, one for you, one for your urologist, and one to carry with you to give to an emergency room if you've got to go to an emergency room. And the place to get the AUA guidelines is here, auanet.org. Right-hand corner of their website is a link that says guidelines. Click that. Search for interstitial cystitis. Print the sucker out. It's going to be 50 pages, 50 best pages you've ever read. 3 copies, one for you, one for your urologist, and one for any emergency room you might have to go to. It's easy for a urologist to discount you saying, I learned this on Facebook, or I learned this on the web. They're going to go, I don't care. What you're going to say instead is, I learned this from the American Urology Association, which you are a member of. You give them the AUA guidelines. They cannot discredit that at all. And the AUA guidelines are really compassionate when it comes to pain care. Okay, so if you're struggling with pain, that's good too. It doesn't talk about subtypes, but that said, it's a good document. All right. So Facebook, you know, again, it scrolls by really fast. If you asked a question before and I missed it, please ask it again. Leanne says she's been diagnosed with IC, endo, and IBS along with others. Your file is embarrassing, girl. You know, one of the greatest gifts of being older is I remember, I had this really, when I was 30, 35, I had this really hot primary care doctor, like, oh my God, handsome, like, oh my God, handsome. And I was single. The last thing I wanted to talk to him about was hemorrhoids or IBS. I was dealing with this really painful hemorrhoid at the time. And I would call, because I'm a Kaiser member, I would call urgent care, and I would want to see a woman instead, and I'd go talk to the woman instead. And then finally one day he's like, when I was seeing him for my toe or something, he's like, I see you've come in a couple of times to talk about this. Why aren't you talking to me? And I was like, I'm just kind of embarrassed to talk to you about it. He blew my mind. He goes, Jill, I have Crohn's disease. If there's anything you can talk to me about, it's your gut. It's like, you'd never know. This total hottie, Crohn's disease. We also have a couple of hottie IC researchers, and our joke here in California, if you went to one of them, was how really sad it was that you, as a single woman, would go in and have to talk about painful sex to somebody that was, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying that, but it's true. Okay. We're human. We can be embarrassed by stuff, but when you're older, it's finally like, you know what? It's peeing and pooping. There's no reason to be ashamed of it like you were when you were a kid or in your 20s or 30s. Okay, Libby says, you've had a cysto twice, your bladder is healthy, you've had installations, they did nothing. Would a functional medicine doctor be your best option? Why not? But I would want a pelvic floor assessment first, Libby. Let's find out what's going on with your muscles and if your muscles are contributing to this at all. Gabriella says period was 7 to 9 days. The first, third, and fifth were the worst. I was 9 years old. Hey man, my period started when I was in 4th grade myself. It's crazy. Delia says, this disease is so debilitating. You haven't been able to work for 8 years, so 39 now. So Delia, let's remember the AUA guidelines say if you're not responding to treatment, if you're getting worse over time rather than better, let's revisit the diagnosis. That's the point of our lecture today and this meeting today is, have we missed something? Have you missed something? Do you have untreated Hunner's lesions? Do you have tight pelvic floor muscles? Do you have a yeast infection? Could you have fibroids? It's time to take a step back and revisit that diagnosis and start ruling some of these out. You are an anatomical mystery to be solved. Somebody asked what's PN. PN is pudendal neuralgia or pudendal nerve entrapment. That means that you've got muscles so tight, they're compromising nerves in your pelvis. So your symptoms tend to be positional in nature. You're fine when you stand, but when you sit down, you hurt. You might get shooting pain down your leg. You might get a vibration if you sit too long. That nerve or that muscle can start to flutter. It's called a fasciculation. I was working with one man who, when he sat down, his penis started vibrating so violently it would throw him off the chair. That is a classic pudendal nerve entrapment. Again, usually it's muscle, tight muscle compromising nerves. IC subtype 4 pudendal neuralgia. Donna says she found out she's allergic to yeast. That explains your yeast infections. I don't know if that would explain your yeast infections, hon. If you're allergic to yeast, you're going to have an autoimmune reaction to it. You're going to have inflammation. Yeast is an overabundance of yeast. It's more likely due to you eating a lot of sugar or taking antibiotics. It's apples and oranges. Gabriella says, all of you say you go to pee often. I don't, sometimes just once. I see people coming out and going to the bathroom, but not me. What's happening? Well, Gabriella, what that tells me is your bladder wall is in very good shape. That's good news. So it's time to look elsewhere. That it's not your bladder wall that's driving your symptoms. It's probably your pelvic floor or something else. Leanne says you need more IC awareness in the United Kingdom. Actually, Leanne, you actually have a wonderful IC group in England. Bladder Health UK is their new name. They used to be they've changed their name, I think, 3 times now. They were the IC UK, and then they were the COB Foundation, the Cystitis and Overactive Bladder Foundation, and now they're Bladder Health UK, and they have IC groups all over the UK. Yeah, Sarah says her Facebook's not allowing her to scroll. Yeah, try a different browser. Try Chrome. Tina says she did the Microgen diagnostics test and they said it's a vaginal infection. I'm confused because I have no signs for a vaginal bacterium. Could that bacteria also cause an infection in your bladder? Yeah, definitely. Sarah says, how many types of IC do you think there are? I actually think there's probably, I'm going to say 16 to 18. I do. I mean, in the United Kingdom right now, they're working on a structure of 16. I actually think it's more than that. Beverly said, did I have my hemorrhoids removed? No, no. It's actually very interesting. I have what I call rectodynia. And what that means, you know, we got vulvodynia where we've got a really sensitive vulva, right? I have a really sensitive rectum. I think it just comes from being a redhead and having vulvodynia and sensitive nerves down there. So I was having this really ghastly pain. And it turns out that I had one internal hemorrhoid the size of a sunflower seed kernel. Like this big, right? So small after they did all the tests, the colonoscopy and all that sort of stuff, try to figure out why I was in so much pain. They decided that it was actually on a nerve. My biggest issue was I just wasn't eating enough fiber and things were a little firm, hard. And when you put something hard on a nerve, it hurts. So that was when I learned that I wasn't eating a lot of fiber, which ironically is yet another story in our latest magazine. You guys, if you like these support group meetings, please come on over to the IC Network and become a member of the IC Network so you get this awesome magazine, which I pour my heart and soul into. I have a nice team of writers. We also have a crossword puzzle. I challenge you. I challenge any of you geeks out there to see if you can complete the crossword puzzle. But anyway, we have a story on fiber and the difference between soluble fibers and insoluble fibers. That will help. Once I learned that, my challenge is I was eating a lot of granola that has really rough, hard edges, and that was hurting as it was passing over the hemorrhoid. When I switched over to softer, soluble fibers, it improved 90%. So Stephanie says, 27 years ago, she was told 27 years ago she has no bladder lining and the inside was nothing but scar tissue, but your symptoms went away for many years, but is now back with a vengeance. And 1.5 years ago, you had your bladder developed a hole. You almost died from sepsis, but you had no IC symptoms when that happened, and you're scheduled for cysto on the 18th. We'll find out what condition inside. I'm scared they want to instill DMSO. I have no insurance. I'm lost, homebound, no relief. So, Stephanie, I'm really glad that you're going to have the cystoscopy. I don't know if you're having a hydrodistension with cystoscopy or just a cystoscopy. A cystoscopy can be done in the doctor's office. It's a quick kind of, I call it a looky-loo, 5-minute. They numb your urethra, put the instrument in, the cystoscope, take a look around, pull it out, you're done. It will not necessarily give the doctor a really, really close look at the bladder, but it's a start. It's a start. If they're doing instead a hydrodistension with cystoscopy, that is normally done as an outpatient procedure with twilight anesthesia or anesthesia because they fill the bladder with fluid. And when you fill the bladder with fluid, it can hurt. I think it's really, really important when you talk with your doctor. You say you're worried that they're going to do DMSO. Well, a lot of doctors aren't doing DMSO anymore. Most doctors are not doing DMSO anymore, especially after a cystoscopy. What they're doing instead is rescue installations. It's called a rescue for a reason, because it will rescue you out of a flare by numbing your bladder. But before you have it done, you need to have a real clear discussion with the doctor about what they intend to do here, hon. You're the boss. They're not the boss. You're the boss. You pay them. They don't pay you. They should not be doing anything without telling you what they're doing first. Period. Done. Over. So you need to have a sit-down consult with that doctor, number one, about how he's doing the cystoscopy. What is he going to do based upon what he finds? If he finds Hunner's lesions, we don't treat those with DMSO. We treat them by cauterizing them or injecting them with a steroid. All right. So I think your worry about DMSO is, I'm going to say the vast majority of doctors out there no longer use DMSO, or using it to a much less degree than they were 10 years ago. All right. The rescue installation, the heparin lidocaine installation, you might actually feel better with that. So please go have that conversation with your doctor. Okay. I swear we could write a book on based upon what you guys are talking about. Your stories here are amazing. Sarah says, I always feel like I have to pee, but I will not go. Sounds like you've got what we call a false sense of fullness, where your bladder feels very, very full, but when you go to pee, there's nothing there, because there really is nothing there. It's just a sign of a bladder that is extremely irritated. That's the penultimate IC bladder wall flare, when you're in that position where you feel full and you feel like you desperately need to pee, but there's nothing there. Leanne says, check out Professor Chris Chappell. Leanne, I don't know anything about him. If you could email me his info, I would really love it. Sarah, though, you know, it's really, really important that you make sure that you're drinking water. You got to keep, you guys, you got to keep your urine diluted. Please keep your urine diluted. If you're not drinking enough water, your urine is getting concentrated. And if you have a bladder wall injury, you're just going to make it worse because of that concentrated chemical-induced irritation. Hi, John. Nice to see you. Sahar says, nothing is wrong with my bladder wall, but it hurts when you eat salt. Did I talk to you last week? I don't really understand that. What I would think is that if you are who I think you are, and you are over 50 or over 40, you are, or actually you might be younger, but if you have entered some estrogen atrophy, then your bladder is going to be more vulnerable. So here is a three-dimensional picture of the bladder wall, right? Okay, so we normally have a layer of mucus, and then 4 to 5 layers of urothelial cells. And then underneath that, we've got green nerves and blood vessels, right? This blue mucus acts to protect the skin. It's a barrier, right? It keeps the irritants in your urine, like the salt, off of the nerves and off of the cells. Unfortunately, this is estrogen dependent. So when you're young and you have lots of estrogen, you have lots of mucus. But when you're older and you have less estrogen, you have less mucus. Thus, your bladder is more vulnerable to the salt. So my thought would be that maybe that's going on. Kylie says she's scared of the Elmeron because it's causing eye problems, but it helps you so much. Hun, just go have an eye exam. Okay, in our survey, we got about 1,000 patients who have completed our survey, 800 and so who have taken Elmeron. 53% report eye problems, 47% do not report eye problems. So just get your eyes tested. If you're having any blurry vision, difficulty with low light, blind spots, things like that, get your ass to the eye doctor quickly, okay? Gabriella, is the potassium test reliable? No. It turns out the potassium, what potassium will do is it will assess the health of your bladder wall. If your bladder wall is compromised and you don't have a lot of mucus, the potassium is going to get down here and it's going to scream. But it turns out that if I would have to dig for the research. Multiple research studies have found that the potassium sensitivity test is not reliable. Kim says, going through menopause, can't take hormones due to endometriosis. Would Sister Protect a Sister Renew or wait for the new product? You know, I think the new product is going to kick the butt of all the other products, to be quite honest, because it's called Bladder Builder. It's got the chondroitin for the bladder coating effect. It's got the quercetin for the antihistaminic effect. It's got beneficial bacteria. It's got PEA, which is known to help improve pain. It's got, actually, the company is working on another supplement that will include biofilm busters too. I don't think we didn't put that. They didn't put that in the Bladder Builder, but I think the Bladder Builder is going to be amazing. But again, it's going to be 2 weeks or so before we have it. So if you want to start with the Sister Protect or the Sister Renew, give it a shot. Either or. It's already being used in clinic, Ken Peters' office up at Beaumont, as well as some other urologists who are already testing it. And so far, it's getting a really, really good reviews. So, but it's an early supplement. We don't have a research study supporting it yet. It's just an attempt to create a next generation supplement based upon what we know about all this today, and that research will happen. But we all want to get it to patients as quickly as we can because we think that it's a real game changer. So. Okay, Sue says, I'm having a UTI. IC diagnosed 5 years ago. My pain is in my urethra. Hurts so bad. I've tried many treatments. Currently have a UTI. Had it for a while because my IC feels like a UTI. Urine smell. She tried antibiotic microbid 7 days. Zurabil. It didn't work. And it won't let me scroll. I just lost it because it just went up my scroll line. Again, next generation test, my dear. Make sure we got to make sure we know what we're treating. We don't want to just throw a broad spectrum antibiotic now at infections because so many bacteria are resistant to infections. So having really good antibiotic sensitivity testing done is important. And the cool thing about the next generation urine test is it identifies antibiotic resistance genes, and it will absolutely tell you what will and will not work for that infection. Tina asks a very, very good question. Why do I have high leukocytes and epithelial cell tissue in every urine test, but very little bacteria? Well, again, number one, it's about the test. So, Tina, having the next generation test would be very interesting to rule out chronic infection, but I can't explain why we have often have leukocytes in our urine, even if we don't have infection. So let's look at this again. So this is really interesting. A leukocyte, a white blood cell, is your body's army. It is what attacks infections and kills infections, right? That's what its purpose is. And in some miraculous way, when you get a splinter or you get, an abscess in your mouth, wherever, your body is going to mobilize white blood cells to that area to try to kill that infection. It's an infection buster, right? Okay. But here's what happens. If you've got an injury, not an infection, an injury, you've got chemicals getting into here. And those chemicals don't belong there. And in ways that we still do not understand, these cells are able to communicate that there is an invader. So what happens then is the body sends through these blood vessels leukocytes, white blood cells, to the area to try to kill whatever the invader is. But what's interesting is, how does a leukocyte get out of the capillary and end up here? And the answer is that the capillaries release them. The capillaries open and allow the white blood cells to leave and get into that area to kill what's ever there. And that's why we have more white blood cells in our urine that might or might not be the result of infection. Sometimes they're just sent that to that area because there is an invader in that area, which is irritants in urine. Okay? Fascinating part of bladder biology. Anytime you have visible blood in your urine, that is a call to the doctor, no exception. Visible blood in the urine is always a concern. As the patient story I told at the beginning, hers was the result of a polypropylene stitches that had perforated through her bladder. But blood in your urine can be the sign of a pathogenic infection, but it can also be a sign of cancer. Bladder cancer, especially if you're a smoker. If you got blood in your urine, get your tissue to the doctor, get it tested. The cool thing is that if you are a smoker, you have to understand that all those byproducts, those carcinogenic byproducts, end up in your urine. God forbid you be older and you not have a lot of protective coating. All those carcinogens are going to get right in here. And there you go, bam, bladder cancer. But if you catch bladder cancer early, it's very, very treatable and curable. But if you wait and that cancer starts progressing this way and it goes through the bladder wall, you're in for a much more difficult time. Also understand too, with HPV, human papillomavirus, we're seeing a lot more cancers on the vulva, in the vagina, in the urethra, and in your bladder. I was working with a young patient in her 30s who had urethral cancer, and from the HPV virus. Please, 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 please understand how important that vaccine is. In her case, she was 34. She had to have her urethra removed, her bladder removed, and her entire uterus, ovaries, vagina, everything removed because of the HPV virus. Devastating. So that HPV vaccine is really, really, really important. There are many different species of human papillomavirus, 4 associated very clearly with cancer. If you have any doubt, get yourself tested. If you've got that variety, you got to be on top of it. You got to be on top of it. All right, let's Kim says she had, okay, Gabrielle is asking about alkaline water. Guys, I'm not a fan of alkaline water. Please don't waste your money on alkaline water. Alkaline water is just as damaging as acidic. I mean, alkaline urine can be just as damaging as acidic urine. As a chemist, we have funny things that we say to ourselves. And I remember one chemistry instructor saying to me in college, he said, bleach will eat your eyeballs out just as quickly as sulfuric acid, as they were getting us to wear our goggles. And that's very important. When we know that if you get acid on your hand, it's going to turn red and burn. If you put bleach on your hand, what happens is it gets very slippery. And it gets very slippery because the bleach is actually eating away at the cells. And bleach is alkaline. So your goal is to be pH neutral spring water. pH neutral. If you're going to do alkaline water, 1 a day, not more than that. There's just no reason to do more than that. And if you're calling, I'm not going to answer the phone. I'm sorry. Kylie, the supplements are Cysto Protect or Cysto Renew. You can find those over on the IC Network website in our shop. Sarah says, the pain to pee in the pelvis. Let's see. I hate when I have to pee. I cry every time. All right, guys, listen. If you have urethral pain, and you hate peeing because you know your urethra is going to scream, that can be caused by 7 potential things. And I've got a blog on our website, The 7 Causes of Urethral Pain. Urethral pain is common with an active infection, number 1. But urethral pain is also very, very common with estrogen atrophy. So if you're of a certain age and you feel like you've got a drop of urine stuck in your urethra that will not come out, we're looking at estrogen atrophy, my friends. We're looking at estrogen atrophy. The new doctor went over all the chemicals again. It's like, honey, come on, you don't need to tell this, but laundry detergent, got to be careful with your laundry detergent. You can't use any fabric softener. You can't use any dryer sheets. You have to be careful with spermicide. You can't do douches. There are so many things that can trigger all that skin down there. So please go over to our website and watch and search for the blog, The 7 Causes of Urethral Pain, and that will get you started. Lynn wants to know how to get the next generation urine test. Just go over to bladderhealth.org. Bladderhealth.org. I built a website on it last summer, and that is that website. There's lots of videos over there of urologists who are doing it. And there you go. Bladderhealth.org. The name of the company is Microgen. So Cindy, if you yell every time you pee and your bladder is bleeding, then that is a call to your doctor tomorrow. It should not be bleeding. What I would want to know is, number 1, is your urine red? Are you passing clots, or are you just getting little bright red spots on your toilet paper? If that's the case, then you're having vulvar bleeding. But if you're peeing red, then we need to figure out why. That is not normal. That is a call to your doctor. Kathy said she had a hysterectomy when she was 38. You're 70 now. You've been taking Elmeron for 4 years because of IC. Had laser surgery on both eyes 4 months ago. My eyes were so bad I was legally blind. I know my IC was hormone driven. So Kathy, you want to make sure that you bring the Elmeron eye article on our website so that they can check your eyes for pigmentary maculopathy. We want to make sure that you don't have any more eye problems. We want to make sure that the Elmeron is not causing that. You know, since we haven't talked about that yet, let me just tell you that story real quick. So it was a year ago that researchers at the Emory Eye Institute published a paper in the Ophthalmology Journal in which they suggested that they had found a new eye disease related to the use of Elmeron. They call it pigmentary maculopathy. And I have that original article That's our original article right there. They did not know how to communicate it to the IC world. And to urologists. So what they did is they wrote a letter to the editor of the Journal of Urology last spring, and they were commenting on another IC article, but they wanted to make the urology community aware of what they feel is a very, very deep concern. And I actually have that original letter to the editor that they wrote. And let me read this to you. It's so interesting. We wish to alert readers to a concerning new observation of vision-threatening retinal changes associated with the long-term exposure of pentosan polysulfate. We recently reported our findings of retinal pigmentary changes in 6 patients undergoing long-term therapy with pentosan. They described difficulty reading, trouble adjusting to dim lighting. Each patient had received a standard dosage of Elmeron ranging from 200 to 400 milligrams daily for a median duration of 15 years, for a median cumulative exposure of 2.26 kilograms. Examination findings in patients with this condition are suggestive of injury to the retina and underlying retinal pigment epithelium. Although we have yet to establish causality, the presence of these highly unique retinal findings in this population demonstrates a strong association with long-term Elmiron exposure. These cases were identified during a brief period at our university. Yada, 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 yada. After extensive investigations, including molecular testing for hereditary retinal disease, we found these cases to resemble no other known retinal disease. Furthermore, we are unable to postulate a pathophysiological mechanism linking IC itself to these findings. Pending further investigation, it remains unclear whether drug cessation will halt or alter the course of retinal disease. However, we encourage drug cessation in affected patients. Furthermore, we currently recommend that any patient with suggestive visual symptoms undergo a comprehensive ophthalmic examination with a specific test. These recommendations will undoubtedly evolve as we learn more, okay? So, of course, this is a case study is when you study one patient. A case series is when you study a series of patients. So in this case, it was 6 patients. They actually had many more IC patients in their clinic who had all presented with these really interesting eye symptoms. And as they were trying to figure out why these patients were struggling, the only commonality is that they were all taking Elmiron. So some doctors have kind of, well, and actually, let me just show you. So here is the original article. And I want to just show you the pictures. So in this case, they took 6 of this group of IC patients and profiled them. And yes, their average age was older. However, the patient with the most severe symptoms, who's actually been in some of our lectures here on Facebook, she was 24 when she started Elmiron. And by the age of 30, she had eye problems. And in this case series, she has the worst, most damage in her eyes. So that long-term use is not necessarily what 10 to 15 years or 20 years. It actually might be a much shorter period of time. But let me show you the picture so that you can see. So there are a number of tests, different types of tests that can be done to look at the retina. So this is a time series. So the pictures on here were at the first appointment, and you can see over time, the retinal changes got worse and then much, much worse. And so what these guys, are really, really clear on is that if you, as an IC patient taking Elmiron, are having any eye issues at all, it's very, very important that you take this article, this information to your eye doctor and get tested, because we don't want it to get worse. Some patients have blind spots because of this. And we're getting patients every week now from patients who have been diagnosed, as well as ophthalmologists who are calling, asking for more information. Here's an even, you can see how that has progressed, right? No, there were no other medications that were used by more than 2 patients in this group. Nearly all eyes showed subtle pigmented deposits at the level of the retina. The size of the region varied widely. Okay, but hold on. So here's what was so interesting about this team at Emory. These are eye retinal specialists. Man, they're not IC specialists. They really probably didn't even know about IC until this happened, unless they read about it in med school. Their due diligence in crafting this is nothing short of extraordinary. They are creating a very, very compelling case for this, which now multiple patients and multiple doctors are reporting finding, as well as our own research. What they did find is an early research study on Elmiron. So an unmasked clinical trial of 2,499 patients who received Elmiron for up to 4 years eye adverse events were reported, including optic neuritis, amblyopia, and retinal hemorrhage. And of course, the challenge here is that you as the IC patient would never say if you're having eye problems to your urologist, just like you wouldn't say to your ophthalmologist that you have bladder issues. Finding this connection is nothing short of extraordinary. I mean, these guys were brilliant in discovering this. And so what we did when, let's see, hold on. Early findings resemble those seen in macular degeneration, pattern dystrophy, and other common forms of macular disease. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so when I got this, the last week of August, blew my mind. It's going, holy crap. How the hell are we going to say this to the IC patient community? You want to talk sharing the worst news we've ever had to share? Is this Elmiron work? The only treatment for bladder wall issues, FDA approved, and now we have this? Holy crap. I want to say the S word. I'll try not to. I swear now. So I emailed. So what's interesting is the letter to the editor was responded to by Moldwin, Curtis Nickel and Rob Moldwin. And their response was just, let me read you their response. Pierce et al. Are looking for a platform to let the urology community know about their observations regarding the long-term use of Elmiron and potential ophthalmological complications, so much so that they've used a letter to the editor concerning our recent article on IC. We are happy that they have a chance to present their observations. They describe a toxic maculopathy characterized by symptoms of difficulty reading, prolonged dark adaptation, yada, yada, yada. Pentostin, which received conditional FDA approval in 1986, has been prescribed to tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of patients with IC. The optimal dose, pharmacokinetics, mode of action, and even efficacy remain unclear, although safety was never considered a major issue. Many patients with IC remain on this medication for years and even decades. It is quite unlikely that urologists treating patients with IC ever would have made this association. Yet the implications are either frightening if our treatment is causing this condition or instructive. And then they proposed more research. So with Rob Moldwin's help, we launched our own survey, which now we have almost 1,000 patients who participated. And we have 53% rate of retinal problems with the Elmiron patients who have participated. And more doctors around the country are finding it. So please take this seriously. I have never taken Elmiron. And it was, I never really wanted to. Somebody asked on Facebook, is hydroxyzine considered safe? Yes. Hydroxyzine is an antihistamine that is, can help reduce some of the mast cell-induced inflammation in the bladder. I can explain that a little bit more. This is our summer magazine, and summarize the class taught on pelvic pain at the AUA class. They have a really nice graph here. So this is really IC subtype 2 bladder wall driven. And I don't think, again, you can get this copy if you're a member, or you'll be able to download it from your member page. There is an initial bladder injury or insult that causes damage, which then allows potassium and other things to leak into the bladder wall, which then turns on nerves. It turns on the C fibers, and that's where tricyclic therapy, a low-dose antidepressant, might help calm that nerve. And then what happens when those get turned on is that you get mast cell-induced activation, which causes histamine release, and you get stuck in this vicious cycle right here of histamines irritating nerves, nerves irritating histamines, and you're stuck here in this really nasty cycle of pain. And so the antihistamine is used to stop that. The low-dose antidepressant is used to stop that. And I think I can hold that up a little bit more. Interesting, right? So that's why an antihistamine like hydroxyzine would be used. I used it for 10 years. I found it to be very helpful, if not just for the fact that it also provides a mild antihistaminic effect. I mean, an anti-anxiety effect. And if you're dealing with pain, you're anxious. And so having something that can take a little bit of that, give you a little bit of a chill to that is not a bad thing. Hi, Stacy. Hey, one of our writers, Stacy, our lead writer for the IC Optimist, has joined. She is an IC patient who is a wonderful writer. Joan says, manufacturers of the HPV vaccine have said it's no good for you at all. It's created to make money. You know, Joan, all you got to do is talk to a 34-year-old who's had a urethra removed, her bladder's removed, and everything else removed because she has an HPV-induced infection. You get a completely different take on the importance of that vaccine. You just got to dive into it. You got to dive into it and read about it a little bit more. You know, there's a lot of misinformation on social networking about it. You got to go right to the research studies, go to the National Library of Medicine and read about it. But I will tell you, HPV is causing a hell of a lot of cancers, from throat cancer, to urethral cancer, vulva cancer, things like that, that are beasts. They're just beasts. Beverly says she took Elmeron for years. You're having laser surgery. Now, tomorrow you're having laser surgery on your eyes. You know, there's genetic eye conditions too, hon. So it's really hard to say. Sarah says her kidneys hurt. So Sarah, is it your kidneys or is it your lower back muscles? It's something we got to get checked out. Thank you, Valerie. So if you sign up for our free newsletter, that's not the magazine. The magazine is a paid membership. The newsletter is free. I send out newsletters once a month, once every 2 months. But the magazine contains information that many of the stories do not come onto our website for 6 months. They're more comprehensive, in-depth discussions that you're going to find on our website. Websites are kind of the dinosaurs of the internet now, guys. I mean, it's so interesting. So many people don't come to websites anymore. They go to YouTube, which is why, and Facebook, that's why we're doing these streams. No, Leanne says, how many of you have had to go pee while watching this? Hey, man, that's the cool thing about participating in an online support group. You can get up whenever the hell you want to get up. And you know what? This is my miracle. I have got this wonderful phone headset like this, man. I could be working with patients and in and out of the bathroom, and nobody has a clue. Sarah says your cultures always come back with protein, no infections, just blood in your urine. So you got something else going on, hun. Betty says she's interested to hear about the Elmeron pigmentary maculopathy. Frightening because I don't know if I could live without Elmeron. So Betty, you know, there are other products that also provide a bladder coating effect besides Elmeron, specifically chondroitin and hyaluronate. And so if you go back on our Facebook page to a year ago or 11 months ago, this was talked about at the class at the American Urology Association. Other mucosal barriers include Cystoprotect, Cystorenew, Desert Harvest Aloe, and the new bladder builder that will come out. Those all also have a bladder coating effect to some degree, and that's where patients are going. Patients are moving to those supplements because they don't have the safety concerns that Elmeron does at this point in time. Rebecca, the problem with culture is that they can miss up to 50% of infections. Yeah, that's true. That's why the next generation testing is that's what all the researchers are doing now. Everybody's doing next generation testing because isolates DNA. It's affordable. 5 years ago, next generation tests cost tens of thousands of dollars. Today, they cost $199. You can order your own next generation test in 25 states over on bladderhealth.org. You don't need your doctor's signature. And again, it's data. It's data. It's interesting. If it shows candida, then you've got a fungal infection in your bladder. If it's completely clean, then you can let it go. If you have no pathogenic bacteria, then you can, put a dot on it and move on and focus on your pelvic floor instead. It's just interesting, meaningful data. All right, let's go back to some of these email questions. So the next question literally is from somebody. I've been on Elmiron for 8 years. I have some vision problems that appear to be related to Elmiron. Is there a drug safer that will still help alleviate the IC symptoms? I can't tolerate this, but I definitely don't want to go blind. Can the eye changes be prevented or at least stopped at a certain level? And so what the doctors at Emory say is get off the Elmiron. If you're having any eye issues, you need to get off of it immediately. She wants to know why doctors that specialize in retinal diseases are not aware of it, because it's very new, hon. It was only described for the first time a year ago, and we're getting the word out now. And the question is there a drug safer? There are bladder installations that can provide a coating like heparin lidocaine, or you can try the over-the-counter supplements. We have another patient who says, can Elmiron make you blind? The answer is if you are one of those patients who are having eye issues and your eye symptoms and your eyes are progressively damaged because you're continuing to take it, then yes, it can certainly cause long-term vision changes, as well as potential. I know the first patient that called me after we released it said, oh my God, thank you. You've just prevented me from going blind, because her eyes have been getting progressively worse over the previous couple of years. And with this paper, they were able to find the pigmentary maculopathy. They've stopped the Elmiron now, and they now believe that they have prevented further damage from happening. It's a patient who says she believes that her IC was caused by the Epstein-Barr virus 37 years ago. If you have Hunner's lesions, then that's absolutely a possibility. So here's another Elmiron story. This is very, very interesting, and it gets back to this other study these guys found. I've had IC for over 30 years and was put on Elmiron in 2008. I was only on it for a very, very short time. The reason I had to go off of it is because I had horrible eye pain and pressure. I was only on it for about a month due to the eye pressure being so intense. After going off of the Elmiron, the eye pressure and pain disappeared. Not sure if one more story may help, but I hope it does. I was not a fan of the Elmiron. Thank you for sending that in. Another IC patient is asking, my physical therapist has suggested the Apex M, and as asking if anybody has used Apex M. I have no idea what that is. Apex M. No clue. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, it's a bladder device. Okay, it's basically an internal device that will help you tighten your muscles. So if you were incontinent, you had very, very weak muscles, and you were leaking, then something like the Apex M, which you would put internally in your vagina while you're doing your exercises, might be helpful. But if you've got pelvic floor dysfunction due to very tight muscles, it makes absolutely no sense. Somebody's wondering if they took Elmiron 19 years ago for 2 years, could they get eye problems now? She did not report or experience any eye problems while taking Elmiron. We don't know. I would certainly get your eyes checked for pigmentary maculopathy. The good news is you stopped it many, many years ago. So if there was damage, it was probably very, very tiny. Next person is asking, again, Elmiron is the only drug that works well for her. She tried to get off of it, but she had a lot of bladder pain, so she's not sure what to do. What are other IC patients doing for treatment when you can't take Elmiron? And again, you're going to the coatings. You're going to the heparin lidocaine installations, maybe a daily heparin installation at home that they can teach you to do, or the supplements, Cysto Protect, Cysto Renew, Desert Harvest Aloe, or the new Bladder Builder, all have are believed to have bladder coating effects. So that's what most patients are doing, is they're going over to the supplements instead. And you can find those over on our website and read more about them. I may have IC or vulvodynia. After many years of reading and seeing doctors, mostly gynecologists, I continue to ask, why would I see any other specialist in search of a diagnosis? My reading teaches me that few remedies for relief. It sounds long and painful to go to the urologist route with much available. You know, Nancy, there comes a time when a guess does not work. And you're guessing right now. Everybody's guessing. And I mean, do you want to guess for another decade and suffer? Or do you want somebody to look and go, oh, look at that. You have a lesion. Let's treat it. I don't like guessing. If I'm in pain, I want somebody to look at it. Tell me why it's hurting. And, you know, sometimes medical fear can stop us. And that's really, it stopped me from, I mean, I started bleeding, which turned out 6 months later to be early uterine cancer. And I didn't want to have the tests. So I waited 6 months. Stupid. Stupid. And I'm an educated woman. And I was stupid. You know, if there's any doubt, go get tested. And so at this point in time, what you're doing is you're just guessing, and that's not good enough. You could have a bladder stone floating around in your bladder that's cutting your bladder wall, and that might be why your bladder's hurting. They won't see it unless they look. And when you get that bladder stone out of there, bam, you might heal and be completely cured. Or you might have a fibroid, or you might have this, or you might have that, or you might have pelvic floor dysfunction. So it's time to be a detective. It's time to study your anatomy and ask, what in my anatomy can be triggering these symptoms? And you can start on our website by just watching the subtyping video. That'll give you a heads up. But please don't be afraid of the doctor. I want you to walk in knowledgeable and informed. I don't want you to walk into the doctor and say, I think I have IC. You'll fall down the rabbit hole of IC. That is a mistake. I want you to walk into the doctor and say, this is my symptom. My urethra screams when I pee. Can you please help me understand why my urethra is hurting? Or I am having blood in my urine. Can you please help me understand where this blood is coming from? Or I am having this, or I am having that. Don't say you have IC. Say, this is my symptom. Can you help me understand the structures that would be triggering this symptom? And help them do a proper diagnostic workup. And I want you to pay attention to the weird little things that you might not think are important. The fluttering sensation when you sit for too long. The spasm you get at the end of urination, or the relief you feel at the end of urination, or when you bend over in a certain way, you get a terrible pain. Those are all important pieces of this puzzle to be solved. All right. Leslie says, I'm 52. My pain is in my urethra, burns at the start of flow, then can burn at the end, just carries on burning. Had Next Generation several times, which showed enterococcus almost every time. You can't hardly tolerate the antibiotics. They make it worse, cause tingling in the clitoral area, nearly all foods and supplements. I've been eating about 6 things only for the last 5 years. Cystoscopy showed nothing at a loss of pain of what to do. Sometimes I can ease the pain with a rectal massage. Don't understand why that helps. Found that by accident when using a cream for hemorrhoids. So Leslie, what the piece you haven't shown here is what the hell's going on with your pelvic floor? Could be enterococcus might just be part of your biome. It doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, Enterococcus is kind of that mystery bacteria that some people feel is bad and some people feel is not that much of a concern. And I don't have an answer for that. I've been diagnosed with Enterococcus, although not in my recent test. But at your age, really what we would be looking at first is estrogen atrophy, hon, and then pelvic floor. If, you know, here's your urethra, here's your pelvic floor. You know, I mean, they're cupping around your urethra. If they're tight, they're squeezing your urethra. They're squeezing blood flow, supporting your urethra. So that's what I would want to know. Betty, does Elmeron cause dry eyes? I don't think so. I don't think it was ever reported in any of the studies. Leanne wants to know why your bladder has shrunk. You know, your bladder is composed of muscle. You know, the bladder is a really interesting organ because it's the equivalent of a human balloon. So it starts small, and then as it fills up, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Until that nerve triggers that need for you to, that signal that it's time for you to empty your bladder. You pee and it all collapses down again. So it starts and it gets big. It's a fascinating organ. It's fascinating how the molecules are arranged, as the cells are arranged, the muscles function. The bladder is composed of smooth muscle. You've got two different types of muscle. You've got smooth muscle and you've got striated muscle. Smooth muscle is kind of organ muscle. Striated muscle is skeletal muscle of your pelvic floor. You treat them in different ways. So sometimes the bladder can shrink from inflammation. Sometimes the bladder can shrink from scar tissue. And so if you've had repeated hydrodistensions, repeated laser therapy, that scar tissue can be tough and that limits it. So it might only open on one side and not the other side. As long as there's no pain associated with it, they might suggest that you do a bladder holding protocol. Some of us, myself included, we get into a habit of just peeing all the time. It's like, I do it. I'm the queen of doing that. It's like the Queen of England. What they tell the princesses as they're traveling is anytime a bathroom presents itself, you use it because you never know how long. Same thing with an airplane flight. Anytime you have the chance to use a bathroom, freaking use it, even if you don't think you need to use it, because you never know when it'll be denied. I think sometimes we get into the habit of just going, like, especially for me before I go to bed. I mean, I probably go 4 times in the span of 30 minutes just to, it's a habit. And yet I haven't gone once in this chat. And so your kind of muscle memory / nervous system memory gets whacked out and isn't performing normally. And that's why they would do a test called a urodynamics to see if your nerves are behaving normally. But they can give you something called a bladder holding protocol, also known as time voiding, where if you're peeing every 15 minutes, they'll say, okay, hold it to 20 minutes for a couple of days. And if you're fine with that and it doesn't cause pain, they'll have you go to 25. And what that's doing is that's slowly increasing your capacity along with the nerves that are communicating with your brain to teach them how, I mean, there's a whole neurological process that's happening there. The rule of thumb, though, is if holding it causes more pain, then we don't want to do that. We have to wait until you're out of pain before you do that. Sarah wants to know about doing a home catheterization. Your urology clinic would teach you. It's very easy. Great skill to have. Sarah says, what about stem cell therapy? Stem cell therapy has been studied with IC. The results have not been durable. What that means is there's short-term benefit. However, it has to be done again like 6 months later. That was Dr. Elliot Lander at the California Stem Cell Treatment Center. And those are fat-based stem cells and growth factors that they use to create something called stromal vascular faction, which is a mixture of stem cells and and growth factors, and then they give that back to you. And that was found to be successful for the short term, but it did not last over time. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years. I don't know what's happening with that. I don't know if we have new research. Barry says, was Microgen diagnostic testing for chronic UT? Yes, it was, and I recommend it wholeheartedly. Interesting piece of the puzzle. Natalie says, my low back sometimes hurts. My doc says I have overactive nerves. Natalie, I would be very interested to have a pelvic floor assessment, because you've got, with your pelvic floor, you know, your pelvic floor goes from hip to hip, low to high, front to back. The psoas muscle is a big rope-like muscle that starts in the pelvis and goes up into your lower back to your mid back. And that psoas muscle kills me every now and then. I have to wonder if you're having a psoas muscle spasm. Tina Kite, can a broken tailbone cause bladder injury? I have no chronic diseases other than, and the answer is it's not going to cause a bladder injury directly, but what it is going to do is injure muscles. And by injuring those muscles, that's impacting the bladder. And so, yeah, can a broken tailbone trigger lower urinary tract symptoms? Absolutely. The question is the bladder itself damaged, or is it the pelvic floor muscles that are damaged? The odds are it's the pelvic floor muscles that are damaged. We see that a lot in ice skaters, gymnasts, paratroopers, wrestlers, people who fall on their butt a lot. Chelsea says, when I have bladder and pelvic floor spasms at the same time, what supplements would help with that active spasms? You know, hun, chamomile herbal tea and peppermint herbal tea have a nice smooth muscle anti-spasmodic effect, according to research studies. They've tested peppermint tea with colonoscopy, and they found that people who drank peppermint tea before colonoscopy had fewer spasms than people who did not. And so I would be doing the chamomile herbal tea, the peppermint herbal tea. And ultimately, you've got to understand that they're different muscle groups, so you treat them differently. I mean, for bladder spasms usually happen when the bladder is really irritated. I've had bladder spasms once in my life for about 6 weeks because what I thought was a flare turned out to be a really, really, really bad urinary tract infection. And had no clue I had an infection. And when I literally walked into my urology clinic crying without an appointment, and I was their support group leader, and they had never seen me cry. And they pulled me right back, and I described this, how I feared peeing because as the last drops were coming out, I would be bent over, bawling my eyes out. The pain was so bad. And she goes, Jill, don't you know you're having a bladder spasm? And I'm like, no, I've never had this before. I have no clue what this is. And they gave me oxybutynin, also known as diatropan, that literally turns off bladder spasms in 20 to 30 minutes. So if you're having bladder spasms, something like oxybutynin can be very, very helpful. For pelvic floor spasms, it's a different muscle group. So with pelvic floor, we would want you to take a hot shower twice a day. We'd want you to use a heating pad. We'd want you to see a physical therapist to make sure we know what muscles are the issue. You could potentially use a vaginal Valium suppository, or you could take oral Valium, oral baclofen, oral Flexeril. But they're apples and oranges. You treat them very, very differently. And the fact that they're happening at the same time really sucks, my dear. I am so sorry. I can't even begin to imagine what that must feel like. All I know is my bladder spasms had me on my knees. They were rough. Yeah, aloe vera might be interesting. Leanne says try aloe vera. It might be, yeah, aloe vera, calming and soothing. Not everybody tolerates aloe vera well. It can cause some gut distress. But, you know, why not give it a shot? Sahar says, what is the alternative for Interstem? It is Urgent PC. It's known as the ankle stimulation. Rita says, have you heard that aloe vera causes black colon? No, I have not. I will tell you that aloe vera must be processed very, very carefully to remove certain parts of it that are known to cause other health issues. And if you get a cheap version of aloe from China, you are risking it. The only company that I think has done their due diligence well is Desert Harvest Aloe. Black colon, I'm assuming, is bloody stool, bloody black stools. I don't know. I haven't heard it said like that. Sarah says, is there a protein powder that we can drink that are safe? Yes, 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 yes. An egg white protein powder is perfect, or a green pea protein powder is perfect. You just want to stay away from soy. Kim said, the eye condition from Elmeron almost ruined my vision. If you get visual problems like I did, you would stop ASAP. My vision is doing great after stopping Elmeron. Kim, would you please if you don't have our newsletter, I'll post it on our website. I really need you to respond to the citizens petition, to share your story. If I can get 1,000 patients to respond to that citizens petition, we have a really good chance of getting the label of Elmeron changed. They made a mistake when they accepted my petition. They turned off comments. And when I emailed them last week and said, what's the next steps? And I have no comments, they went, oh, we're sorry. We didn't mean to do that. So it's been up there for 3 months now, but it wouldn't let anybody submit comments. So we really need comments to that. Sarah's not taking Elmeron because it's $1,000. Good for you. Who the hell can afford that? I can't. Cheryl says, why do they use normal saline, which immediately caused flares for me? You know what? Isn't that infuriating? They could use DI water. Ask them to use DI water. The odds are they probably don't have it. Saline's probably cheaper. But yeah, salt on a wound hurts. Tina says, what do you think happens to your bladder when you broke your tailbone, and what do you think will help? So what happens, Tina, is when you break your tailbone, usually that involves muscle trauma, muscle injury. So your muscles are weak, and because they're weak, they're now tight, and they're restricting blood flow. So what's happening is it's like when you do this. If you squeeze your arm, bam, look, all the blood flow gets driven away, and it takes a couple seconds for the blood flow to come back to that skin. So that's what happens around the bladder, is when your muscles get tight, your bladder loses blood flow. And it's very hard for your bladder to be healthy with blood flow. You know what? Let me open these drapes a little bit. That might be too bright, but things are crap. It's a dance. Let me tell you, trying to make videos work is challenging. All right. Let's go back to questions submitted by email. Another patient says, how do we tell our doctor that we have excruciating pain with sounding like we're drug addicts? Boy, isn't that an excellent, excellent, excellent question. You talk about functions. The sneaky way of doing it is, you have to understand that your doctor evaluates pain based upon their own personal experience. So if they've never had bladder pain, then there's always going to be a little bit of a disconnect because they can't relate to it at all. So how do you describe it? Yes, you can use terms. You can say, and actually, even before you even get there, talk about how the pain limits you. Say, doctor, I get up every 10 minutes at night because my bladder is hurting. I can't sit in a car more than 5 minutes without crying. I can't shop. I can't go to work. I can't go to church. Sometimes I cannot get out of bed because how this pain is limiting my life. And then if the doctor says, okay, describe the pain for me. And that's where you've got to be really clear. You cannot say it hurts down there. That doesn't work. You need to say, my pain is inside my body, in my urethra, or in my bladder. It is on the left side or the right side or centered. It is low or high. And then describe the quality of the pain. Is it dull? Does it have an achy feeling to it, or is it sharp? Does it have a burning sensation to it? So as an example, bladder wall pain tends to be very sharp. Patients describe it like razor blades and ground glass. And so as your bladder fills with urine, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then as soon as you pee and urine is no longer off that wound, there is a sense of relief. So the fuller you get, the worse you feel. As soon as you pee, you feel better. Bam, bladder wall. That tells us your bladder wall is part of this problem. If you have pain, not as your bladder is filling, but during urination, that pain is usually in your urethra. And we're going to look at infection. We're going to look at estrogen atrophy. We're going to look at chemical sensitivity, potentially pelvic floor dysfunction. If your pain is worse after you're done peeing, then that's not your bladder, hon. That's your pelvic floor. And that pain tends to have a burning quality to it. A muscle that's working hard is a muscle that builds up lactic acid. It burns. If you were to go run around the block, you know your leg muscles would start burning eventually because you're working them. Well, tight pelvic floor muscles do exactly the same thing. You're working them. They build up lactic acid. It burns. So that burning sensation we associate more with muscles. That razor blade sensation we associate more with the bladder wall. So when you talk about it, I need you to describe it. You got to be thoughtful here. And I don't want to hear any of that, it hurts down there crap. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Write it down. Do your best to describe it. What makes it better? What makes it worse? What's agony? What do you naturally turn to for relief? Those are all important pieces of this puzzle. And then lastly, when it comes to pain medicine, you know, the AUA guidelines are really compassionate. They want pain assessed at every appointment. They want pain treated. They support the use of opiate medications if necessary, but they don't just want you to take opiates. For God's sake, people, we got to deal with the source of the pain. If you're screaming in pain as your bladder fills with urine and you got blood in your urine, you got Hunner's lesions. Let's get them freaking treated. Because when you treat a lesion properly, the pain usually goes away. I often see patients with untreated pain that gets worse over time is they've got a lesion that was never treated. And that breaks my heart because they've had the hydrodistension. The doctor says you have a lesion and the doctor doesn't treat it at that time. What a rip. We got to treat lesions correctly. Okay, so if you need a pep talk, call me. How to explain pain or discomfort to your friends so they understand. Social life is sometimes hard. Because you can't see it. You cannot see it. We look fine. We look fine, right? I explain it as an internal injury, that I have a pelvic injury. Sometimes it's a bladder injury, sometimes it's a pelvic injury, and they're like, why do you have to pee again? Because I've got an injury, hon. I got an injury, and it just is the way it is, and I'm not gonna be embarrassed about it. It is what it is. No shame, no blame, my friends. No shame, no blame. Are there any new treatments? Yes, in our magazine. In our magazine, I have a sad announcement and a happy announcement. The sad announcement is for Hunner's lesion treatment, that Liris, the only treatment in history to heal Hunner's lesions in 2 weeks, the Liris device, has been deprioritized by Allergan. They've abandoned it. Sitting on the shelf, my friends, sitting on the shelf. Infuriating. Allergan makes Botox. They work with cosmetics. They work with menopause. It's not a moneymaker for them. They didn't say exactly why they deprioritized it, but that's probably why. They probably didn't see that it was going to make, the IC community is a small subset. That is, in fact, the topic of my editorial in this magazine. But on the other hand, we have another treatment, which is also really helping Hunner's lesions, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And so I review the studies because we had yet another new study. So hyperbaric oxygen therapy is normally used for people with who have compression sickness. They are divers who surface too quickly and they get a lot of nitrogen in their blood and it can kill them. So what they do is they put them in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, either a tube or a room, and with massive amounts of oxygen that gets forced through their bloodstream. And that is what saves their lives. And hyperbaric oxygen therapy has been used for radiation cystitis. It has been used for lots of different things. It's used for anemia, brain abscess, burns, carbon monoxide poisoning, traumatic injury, gangrene, sudden deafness, diabetic foot ulcers, radiation injury, skin grafts, sudden vision loss, and radiation cystitis. And they started studying it in Germany in 2004 with IC. 2004 study showed that increasing oxygen levels could help the bladder heal and improved IC symptoms of frequency urgency pain. And most significantly, a dramatic increase in bladder capacity. That same research team released a larger study in 2007. That study too found a decrease in pain and urgency. The researchers concluded that 30 treatments of hyperbaric oxygenation was safe, effective, feasible therapeutic for IC, which resulted in sustained long-term results. Researchers in Japan shared their experience. And they reported that Hunner's lesions disappeared and pain improved, pain and frequency improved. A researcher in Italy chimed in with the same thing. Then Japanese team did another study. Researchers in Spain did another study. And then the #1 IC research center in the United States, Beaumont Hospital, did a study. They sought to determine if hot therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, would be more successful with lesion patients and less effective with patients without lesions. 8 patients completed the study, 6 with lesions, 2 without. 83% of the patients with lesions improved and 66% showing long-term success at 6 months. Only one non-lesion patient improved out of 2. And they want additional studies. And in fact, more additional studies are happening at this time. Right now, there's a clinical trial, I think, in San Diego, looking for IC patients to participate. So how is it done? It's an outpatient procedure. It can be done in a small tube, or it can be done in a room. If it's a small tube, if you're claustrophobic, you might find that difficult. If it's a large room, you just go sit in the room and you have an oxygen mask over your head. There are some risks associated with it. It can cause a feeling of fullness in your ear, similar to what you might feel in an airplane. It lasts about 2 hours. There are risks. Oxygen is extremely flammable. You will take off all metal before you get in, because it is a severe fire risk. There have been ear injuries, including temporary loss of hearing. It can also cause the lens of your eyes to change temporarily, resulting in nearsightedness. It's been slow to arrive in the USA, but is now at specialty centers across the US, across the country. The challenge, of course, is that many urologists are unfamiliar with the technology and are willing to try it. So you can bring them this article and introduce that to your doctor and say, hey, man, what do you think of this? Maybe we should consider this if you've got Hunner's lesions. I think this is a patient from England. My gynecologist keeps prescribing tinidazole. Every time she gets a flare-up, she doesn't think it's helping. Urine is clear, but the burn feels like a UTI. Please advise. So hold on. As you can tell, I do not read these questions before because we get so many. It's an anti-parasitic bacterial infection. It's used for bacterial overgrowth in the vagina. So, you know, the rule of thumb is we don't prescribe antibiotics unless we have a positive culture or if we have a positive next-gen test. So that isn't something that I would certainly do. I mean, that's not recommended anymore. I mean, the good news is at least it's not Cipro. Cipro is devastatingly dangerous at this point in time. But the burn feels like a UTI. Remember, a burning sensation is associated with tight pelvic floor muscles. So I don't know what kind of flare you're having, hon. If you have pain as your bladder fills with urine that is relieved by urination, we're looking at the bladder wall. If you got pain after urination, we're really looking more at the pelvic floor. So I would want you to come to our website and watch the subtyping video and maybe watch our flare management video. And if you sign up for our free newsletter on our website, guys, you get our free flare management guide anyway. Here's another letter somebody is writing. Here's a patient who had some success with InterStim. It's helped her with nighttime urination, but she was still having a lot of abdominal and back pain with her chiropractor put her on a formula for muscle spasms, and that has what helped her tremendously. She's no longer on any bladder medication. She controls her IC with a muscle spasm medication, correct diet, and 100 milligrams of gabapentin each evening. It's called Formula 303. Never heard of it. Obviously can't recommend it. Never heard about it. It's a natural relaxant from DC Labs. Formula 303. Well, it's got a lot of good reviews, that's for sure, but I don't know any of the research behind it, so I can't give you any comments on it at all. Hey man, we're at the 3-hour mark. Holy moly. So here's a question from a journalist who wants to know if there's any possible connection between IC and products in our household medicine cabinets or our kitchen shelves that might somehow damage the bladder. She's interested in how certain classes of antibiotics may affect the bladder if taken in the absence of an actual bacterial infection. I don't know of anybody who's doing that long-term work. I'm sure it would be animal studies. I feel sorry for the animals in those studies. There certainly are different types of antibiotics that are more irritating than others, like Augmentin is certainly much more irritating to the bladder. She's also interested in research on other products in households, including over-the-counter pain relievers, food additives, preservatives, etc. Over-the-counter pain relievers, there is some research with one of them showing that it can be damaging. I don't remember which one it is. I mean, not profoundly damaging, but its use over time was not recommended. I'll try to dig that out. We know artificial sweeteners can be irritating to the bladder. We know certain preservatives can be, food additives can be. But again, ultimately, if you've got a bladder injury, you have to remember that anything in your urine is penetrating deeply into the bladder wall, right? So anything in the urine reaching where it doesn't go. So whether it's cigarette smoke or, you know, a byproduct of the metabolism of artificial sugar, which is metabolized into formic acid, I do believe, anything like that is going to get right here into these tissues and cause issues. So, you know, again, today's modern chemical diet is not how our body was built. The chemical industry is not our friend, I'm sorry to say. Somebody's asking about Botox. She no longer has bladder pain like he used to. Now it's mostly urinary frequency every 1 to 2 hours. Wondering if Botox will help. I heard being used now for elderly incontinence, been effective for some. You know, Botox calms nerves and controls nerves and silences nerves that are dysfunctional. Of course, the problem with Botox is if you accidentally numb the nerve that controls your ability to pee, you're going to have to self-catheterized for a period of time until the Botox wears out. Botox is really not meant to be used for people who are incapable of self-catheterizing. And that's where you see a real conflict with the use of the elderly in nursing homes, because on one hand, you're trying to reduce their frequency, but if they have a devastating side effect from it and can't void, they will not be able to pee on their own. So my last look at the Botox treatment selection criteria was it was not recommended for use in people incapable of self-catheterizing. It is a step 4 treatment option. You can read about it on our website. Here's another one. Gentleman, he said, started PT, having internal work with very light touch, put you in pain for the next 4 days. After having that 2 more times, I don't want this done again. Is this common? What do you suggest? All right, now listen. Now listen. This is where pain is a bit of a gift, because if they can touch a muscle and give you a flare, then hallelujah, you found the muscle. That is exciting. Holy smoke, she touched it and she gave you a flare. So now we know the area that's the problem, and you're going to have to now focus on that area in general. It may be that they have to start externally. Remember, you've got muscles that connect to muscles, that connect to muscles, that connect to muscles. And so muscle A might be the trigger for muscle D. So they may have to start working with your legs or your lower back and get those relaxed, and then work on the muscles around your hip and get those relaxed in a gradual process to finally get to those muscles internal. But it is the best news if they touch a muscle and trigger a flare. That is very exciting to me, because that means we found it. Now they've got to be challenged on how to work with that muscle without triggering that flare. And they may have to back off and start at a distance and move in. That's a really good question for your physical therapist. But I don't want you to stop going to the physical therapist. Are you kidding? You finally found it. And no bladder treatment's going to fix a muscle problem. You got to work on the muscle problem. You guys, it's just going to be a very slow, gradual process. And seriously, people, if you've been diagnosed with pelvic floor dysfunction, I hope that you have invested in either this book, Heal Pelvic Pain by Amy Stein, or this book, Ending Female Pain by Isa Herrera, or this book, Ending Male Pelvic Pain by Isa Herrera. The most important part of pelvic floor work is not going to the physical therapist. It's what you do when you get home, because this is about rehabilitating, you know, a part of your body that for some of us has been dysfunctional for a decade or longer. You've got tightness on the left side, weakness on the right side. You got overcompensation in the left knee, yada, yada, yada. You know, we've been working on mine. We finally got my left side functional, but now that's tweaked out my left knee. And I was at the orthopedic surgeon about that. Do I need to have knee surgery? He goes, no, makes total sense with what you're doing. You're going to have to just go slow and work through it. It's all about strengthening an area that's been injured over time. It's a patient from England who's getting help with an alkaline drop product. Thank you. I want to say names, guys, so bad, but normally when they email me, they want privacy. She says thank you so much, America, for doing so much for IC sufferers. I'm afraid to say I spoke to a newly qualified doctor recently in England, and she had not heard the term interstitial cystitis while training in a London hospital. I was so annoyed. Apparently, it's called non-bacterial cystitis. Well, that's fair. I mean, that's actually more correct than interstitial cystitis, to be honest. Maurice. Oh my God, I said her name. Okay, I didn't say her last name. Ugh. All right. There are lots of Maries in the world. You have no idea who this Marie is. I'm sorry. She says, what happens to people with IC? I've had it for 12 years so far. I'm told I will have this for the rest of my life. What kind of toll would this take? All right. So I want you to watch this video. This is going to be recorded and saved almost immediately. I need you to watch the first hour of this video to talk about all the other things that are known to trigger symptoms of IC. Will you have this for the rest of your life? For many of us, no, because there are other triggers and we can fix those other triggers, whether it's tight pelvic floor muscles, whether it's fibroids, whether it's a fungal infection, what like that. So, you know, you ask what happens to people like you? Well, for anybody who gives up, it's going to be hard. I need you to put your game face on. I need you to be educated. I need you to be formed. I need you to be ready to start asking tough questions of your doctors. You know, watch the subtyping video on our website. Watch the 6 steps of treatment video on our website. Watch the estrogen chat on our website or on our YouTube channel at a beginning. That's number 1. And then number 2, make a list of your symptoms and let's try to finesse those symptoms. Let's try to understand your anatomy more. Let's try to figure out what your subtype is, because you may have a subtype that's curable. So watch the first hour of this again, okay? There's another one. Describe 2 different antispasmodics to help her IC, Vesicare and Spasmolit. The Vesicare makes my skin and mouth and eyes very dry. I prefer the Spasmolit, which makes me too sleepy to function. Both medicines do help me withstand going to the toilet for 2 hours instead of hourly, but they do not help the pain. I've not heard of anyone else discuss taking an antispasmodic. Is there a reason why I should not take an antispasmodic? So again, for you, I need you to watch the first hour of this again. There are different types of antispasmodics for different types of muscle groups. You can take a smooth muscle antispasmodic for the bladder, and you can take a striated muscle antispasmodic for the pelvic floor. Smooth muscle antispasmodics are usually something like oxybutynin, Flexeril, baclofen, Valium are striated muscle relaxers for the pelvic floor. The challenge with taking antispasmodics with the oxybutynin, what happens is if you take it over time, it kind of deadens those nerves. And so for me, I was at like the 3-week mark of taking it every day for 3 weeks. I started having difficulty turning on urination. And that was just the cumulative effects of the oxybutynin. Oxybutynin is really ideal for momentary use rather than sustained long-term use. The challenge with the antispasmodics like Valium is that there can be a bit of an addiction issue to it. I only use Flexeril as needed. And when I use it, I use a very, very tiny dose, 1/4 of a pill. You say Elmiron is not available in your country where you work. Then you turn to the supplements, but we need to make sure you know your subtype, hun. The new supplement Bladder Builder is going to have an active pain fighting effect to it, and that might be also writes a lot of the pain seems to be in the vulva, the urethra. So that's where we're going to look at estrogen atrophy, hon. If you got vulvar pain and urethral pain, we're talking estrogen atrophy. We're talking most likely using a compounded preservative-free estrogen cream to restore the normal mucosal barrier of that skin so that it can protect yourself. If you got urine burning on the outside as you're peeing that goes to the vulva, we're really looking at estrogen atrophy there. All right, I think here's another question. I'm wondering if there's a link between This is interesting. She's wondering if there's a link between semen that can be crossed. So her husband has a brother whose wife has IC, and she got it after marriage. His mother had bladder problems as well. I just find it odd that both of us got it after marriage. Well, it's not odd to me at all because millions and millions and millions of women have issues. There can be a semen allergy for some patients, including my mom. We used to call that honeymoon cystitis. There are some women who have very strong reactions to semen, and it's very irritating. And for others, it's not. And there's this crazy woman right now on Twitter doing all sorts of things with semen, and she's crazy. Okay. So you could have a semen sensitivity, but remember we got subtypes. It could also relate to cumulative muscle injury. If you were a ballerina or an ice skater where you were young and you fell a lot, you sustained some minor but consistent pelvic floor injuries, your muscles were getting tighter, and then bam, you became sexually mature and started having sex, and then that created more pelvic floor stuff. Then you had a baby, that created more pelvic floor stuff, and bam, we're at full-blown pelvic floor dysfunction. That, in all likelihood, is far more the connection between the two wives than anything related to semen. Hold on. Somebody's saying that they thought they had to log into our website to watch this, and the answer is no. It's just you just go to our YouTube channel. No login necessary. Okay, I'm just finishing up the email questions. Somebody's asking where to buy Pre-Leaf. You can buy it in our shop. Just go to the IC Network, ic-network.com, click on shop, and you are good. All right, I'm going to say the email question. Oh, here's one more. We've got somebody from Australia who might be in here right now who's given the name Zohydro for icy pain relief, that you don't have access to it in medication. I don't believe that we have that in the United States, hon. Let me look it up. Oh, it's just codone. It's just hydrocodone. The company that makes it is apparently going bankrupt. So in the United States, we call it Norco. You could do Norco. I mean, there's extended release, which is in the United States is oxycodone, or you can do the 4-hour short acting, which is Vicodin Norco. The 4-hour one it usually works well for IC patients. The advantage of a codeine product, if you're not intolerant to codeine, is generally you can cut it in half. When I take it, I take a quarter of a pill. I never take a whole pill. Haven't in 25 years. So I would look at Norco or Vicodin as an option to that. Alrighty then. I love doing these. I love talking to you guys. All right, last call for questions. Last call for questions. Going back through, Sarah says, can anybody drink coffee? I can drink it once in a while, but only decaf. And it has to be a half shot of espresso, decaf diluted with creamer. Sarah, I'm exactly the same way. Again, it depends on your subtype. If you got Hunter's lesions, the odds you're going to drink coffee are minimal. If you got a healthy bladder wall, the odds are you're probably going to be able to drink coffee. The challenge is caffeine turns nerves on. It stimulates frequency, and most of us really don't want frequency, so backing off on the coffee is important. And the green tea and the black tea. Somebody on YouTube says, my first doctor tried to get me on antidepressants, said it was all in my head. I dropped them immediately. That, you know, you just have to understand, based upon that graph that I showed you guys, that a low dose antidepressant can help stop this nerve irritation and the suppression of substance P, which is part of what drives the pain cycle. So you should never be offended if somebody suggests using a low dose antidepressant like amitriptyline, because it really can help in a small amount. You take a little bit over time and it can kind of calm and stabilize some of that nerves. And I can show you that graph again if you want to see it. Again, this is in our Summer IC Optimist from 2018, right? So we have, hold on, we have an injury that allows stuff into the urothelium, like potassium, which then turns nerves on, activation of the C fiber. And that's where we use tricyclic antidepressant therapy, small amount. So don't be offended by it. The far more important question is, can you tolerate it? I couldn't. Gave me a very irregular heart rate I don't even want to go into that. Christine says, just diagnosed with IC, having your 4th installation tomorrow, still having burning pain after urinating. So Christine, is the burning pain on your vulva? If the burning pain is on your vulva, hun, you've got some estrogen atrophy going on. And so using something like an estrogen cream or V-Magic, which is organic olive oil, avocado oil, sea buckthorn oil on your vulva, can put a barrier in there. Remember, your vulva is a mucous membrane covered organ. So it relies on mucus to protect these cells. And if you pee and you have burning on your vulva, that tells me that your mucosal barrier is poor. And that's usually from estrogen atrophy. So we call that urine burn. And there you assume that your urine is hot, and it's really not. It just means your skin can't defend itself well. So you need to tell your gynecologist or your urologist that you're having that. Have them look at the quality and health of your skin. If you're showing signs of estrogen atrophy, then they should be doing something about that. Catherine, has anybody used dry needling for internal pelvic floor work? Yes, and it's very, very effective. It can break up muscle spasms quickly, especially deep ones. Christine, if you have any questions, hon, please feel free to give me a phone call this week. You guys, I do coaching with patients all the time. You know, I'm happy to work with patients. You can just call, and if I'm available and you have a couple questions, it's fine. You know, we're the only IC group that actually answers the phone. You can, you know, where else can you call and talk to a national expert? I love talking to patients and helping you. It's the best part of my job. But if you want to spend more than 5 or 10 minutes talking about it, I would ask you to sign up for a coaching session, or if you want to really go into an in-depth history, you can sign up for coaching too. And you can do that on our website and our shop. And that's kind of what helps pay for all of this. Again, if you find these support group meetings helpful, please become a member of the IC network and sign up for our magazine, because that's what, number one, that's the information that you'll get before anybody else. You know, remember, we're rated #1 in the world by Harvard. Oh my God. In fact, guess what? You know what happened? I got asked by somebody at Harvard last weekend to write a chapter in a new pelvic pain book. I forgot to tell you, I got to start tomorrow. I got 3 weeks to do it. Woo, baby. How exciting is that? And I've also written a new chapter in another, first chapter in another IC book that's going to be coming out this year. So holy, you know, it's just like, I never heard this person who emailed me last weekend, and I got it last Sunday, and it's like, we would like to invite you to contribute, you know, a big new book on pelvic pain. And I'm going to talk about where patients get support and information. I'm just so honored. I'm so thrilled and so honored by that. And I'm going to kick some butt with what I write, let me tell you. Because I'm telling you, I have this hate relationship with Facebook right now, because so many patients come here and some of the information is so bad. And it just drives me crazy. And I'll tell you, doctors that come onto Facebook and read some of the groups on Facebook are horrified by what they're reading. And there's nothing worse than, I've got a Facebook user who calls me and tells me what's happening to them, and how I've had guys kicked out of IC groups by group leaders who say men don't get IC. What a load of crap is that? Are you kidding? There are 1 to 4 million men in the United States with IC symptoms. How dare you kick a man out of an IC group? All right. Ooh, do not even get me started. Catherine, still chuckling. If they don't treat the lesion, what a rip it is. It's a rip off of your money, because you got to pay for another hydrodistension to have it done. And months of pain and lost income. It is a rip in the worst possible way. Diana, how do you use it if you're claustrophobic? You go to a center where it's just a room. It's just a room you walk into and sit in. There are other people in there. There's a nurse in there. You don't have to worry about claustrophobia. All right, guys. You know what? You've been here a long time. And so I say we need to do a freebie. Oh, well, duh. I got about 10 magazines, 10 of our new IC Optimists. So if you send me your name and address to ic-network.com, the first 10 or 15 of you are not only going to get our new magazine, but you're going to get our bathroom card. Here it is. They just had to send me more. I'm going to send you a restroom access card. And I'm going to send you a, hold on. I will also send you one of your diet. See, that light makes it hard. I know you can't see this. There you go. This is our new IC diet card. Foods to avoid, bladder-friendly foods. Everybody who sends me their address, for sure, I will send you the cards. Everybody, but the first 10 or 15, I will also send you our magazine. Alrighty? All right, last call for questions. Last call for questions. And you can buy those cards on the IC network also. You can buy as many as you want. Susan on Facebook said, I was told by my urologist she saw Hunter's ulcers in the office under scope. I was anesthetized and she was prepared to laser them and they were gone. I always have microscopic blood on my chem strips. Does that mean they could always be there? She seemed unconcerned about, yeah. You know, Susan, if you watch the earlier, if you watch this over again, kind of fast forward, we talk about that. Microscopic blood, not that concerned about, because your body, I mean, if you have estrogen atrophy or a Hunter's lesion and you've got urine entering these cells here, your body is triggering and pushing white blood cells to the area to try to deal with whatever invaders are there. But the real mystery is, how does the white blood cell get out of the blood vessel and into the cell? And the answer is the blood vessel releases it. So it's very normal for us to have a little bit of microscopic blood, a little bit of leukocytes in our urine. Pam, is it normal to bleed with IC, not visible blood, hun? If you've got visible blood, we need to figure out what's bleeding. Sahar says, can we donate to the Liris company to start doing the research again? No. They won't even talk to me at this point in time. I think the best thing you can do is go onto social media, go onto Twitter, go to Allergan and ask them why they've deactivated Liris. Tell them that Liris has helped you dramatically. Why are they putting business interests against patient interests? I mean, we can't say that they're putting profit ahead because we don't know why they canceled it. But I think you can challenge them publicly on social media and Twitter and ask for a response. Why have you canceled the Liris program? Stephanie wants to know a little bit about why Cipro is so dangerous. Cipro has now been linked to multiple serious adverse events. Aortic aneurysm, central nervous system damage, tendon ruptures throughout the body. And there's a small group of patients who might take just a very, very small amount of it, and they have a progressive neurological condition. They call it being floxed. So the FDA does not recommend Cipro or Levaquin or any fluoroquinolone antibiotic be used for any simple infection ever again. And in fact, we have one very prominent IC activist who has developed an aortic aneurysm from Cipro use. And we are, you know, luckily they caught it early, but it's something that they're watching. And so if you come to our website, right on the front page of our website, I have an article about being floxed. In our magazine, we have the same article, actually an expanded article on Cipro. And it should not be used for simple infections anymore. I mean, can you imagine having an aortic aneurysm and dying from it? That's happening. Or taking it for a simple sinus infection and not being able to work a day in your life after that because it's damaged your nervous system. Cipro is a beast. Sarah says, what's the flow of everyone's urine? Hers is a slow trickle with a burst from pushing so hard. Girl, you should never push when you're peeing because you're messing your pelvic floor up. If your urine is, remember, the pelvic floor muscles are the only major muscle group that is involved with major bodily functions. So here's your pelvic floor. And up through the base of it, you've got your urethra, you've got your vagina, and you've got your rectum, right? When your pelvic floor is tight, guess what? You can't release. It's tight. Nothing's going to come out of it. That's why sex can be painful for somebody with tight pelvic floor muscles. When your muscles are weak and stretched out, you get a prolapse and things start to fall out. And that is just as bad. So the fact that your urine flow is slow tells me that your muscles are tight. And when you're pushing, you're making them tighter. You need a pelvic floor assessment, my dear. You got to figure that out. Carrie asks, why is there retention associated with IC? It's the same thing, hon. It's probably tight pelvic floor muscles. That's certainly the most logical cause. Lori, can you have bladder pain and pelvic floor dysfunction? Absolutely. Listen, tight pelvic floor muscles can cause frequency, urgency, pressure pain, including bladder pain. It's a very subtle difference. You know, bladder pain is very sharp and shrill. Pelvic floor pain is duller and achier. Bladder wall injury, your day is completely influenced by restroom access, because the fuller you get, the worse you feel. So when your bladder's full, you need to pee. The pelvic floor, you're not quite as tied to the bathroom, but you are still tied, but it's not as sharp. It's duller, it's achier, it's more consistent. You don't get the highs and lows throughout the day with volume that a bladder wall injury would cause. And again, you finesse. The other thing with pelvic floor is patients will have other muscle symptoms. You will feel a downward sensation or a pushing upward sensation, or movement hurts. If walking or running is triggering pain, that's about moving muscles. If sitting is triggering pain, that's about moving muscles. So I know it feels like bladder pain, but it really could be pelvic floor muscle pain. You need to have a pelvic floor assessment. Natalie, you're the exact opposite. If you get pain as your bladder fills with urine, here, hold on a sec. I have a picture. Let's do it this way. Okay. Here are 16 pictures of 16 different Hunner's lesions. So what's cool about Hunner's lesions is that they tend to have a center structure and then they have arms radiating from it, okay? Now, think about it this way. If your bladder is getting fuller, urine is getting higher and higher and higher and higher until it finally goes into the Hunner's lesion, which is really, really painful. So the fuller you get, the worse you feel. And as soon as you pee, bam, urine is no longer on the lesion and there is a dramatic sense of relief. Okay, so those are Hunner's lesions. So here, this instead is more of a IC subtype 2 bladder wall driven, and it's the same thing. Look at all the wounds. So the fuller you get, urine is getting into the wound till it's really full and you're just dying. It hurts. And as soon as you pee, bam, urine is no longer on the wounds and you feel better, right? So pain as your bladder fills, it is relieved by urination, helps us point to your bladder wall. That is the most logical source of your pain. The question is it Hunner's lesion? Is it, and then all the various subtypes that can be contributing to bladder wall. Estrogen atrophy, yada, yada, yada. Rita, you're right. Your flow is slow and you have to push because of your muscles. You guys do not push to pee. You know, peeing is about relaxation. Muscle A relaxes, muscle B relaxes, sphincter C opens, you pee. If muscle A doesn't release and muscle B doesn't release, and your sphincter is going to barely open and you're going to have to push to get it out. And when you push, what are you doing? You're tightening those muscles even tighter. You need physical therapy. That is important here. And heat, using heat. You gotta, listen, a woman's body, you know, after the age of 20 is compromised. Our muscles have changed. They've changed with sports. They've changed with having babies. They've changed with traumatic injuries. And God forbid, by the time you're menopausal, you've got estrogen atrophy, which means you don't have as much strength in those muscles anyway. We have to re-engage with our muscles here. You cannot be someone who says, I don't want to go to physical therapy. I want to take a pill. A pill will not fix tight muscles permanently. Muscles require muscle work. It means you got to be willing to get on the floor, on your back, and do the exercises they need you to do. Many of us have weak muscles to compensate for tight muscle. I mean, you know, it's just this really interesting puzzle. You know, if you've got, I'll give you an example. Some of us have foot pain that relates to the pelvis. There are moments when I know I'm going to have a bowel movement because my feet start tingling. Started in my 20s. I thought I was insane. What the hell is this? Laying on my couch, my feet start tingling. I remember exactly when it happened. Why? Because in the pelvis, you've got nerves and you've got organs. And in fact, this book has a really good picture of it. Let me find this picture. So what happens for me is I've got a nerve right next to my bowel. And if something of a certain shape goes through that area, it pushes on the nerve. The nerve goes right down my leg, right down to the bottom of my feet. And it's always interesting and fun to talk to other patients who have exactly the same thing. One of the mysteries of the human body. So look at this. So these are all the nerves in the pelvis and how they all end up merging at the spine. And we get something called neural crosstalk. Neural crosstalk, where if the bowel gets irritated, the bladder gets irritated. If the bladder gets irritated, the bowel gets irritated. And I was at my gynecologist last week for this yeast infection. And for me, it was a cycle of 3. My vulva would start burning, and then my bladder, then I would have frequency, and then my rectum would start getting irritated. And I was doing this vicious cycle. And that's just because all those nerves merge. And so the goal is to calm it down in every place, calm all the nerves down. And sitting here, I've only had one little tiny twinge. It's a hell of a lot better than it was last weekend. Let's see. Natalie says Cipro gave her tendinitis. Denise says she refuses to use medication, just watches her foods. Unfortunately, all I've noticed is a large abundance of IC patients over medicating. I'm going to agree with you, but I think I think ultimately in the end, it's because of terrible subtyping. Guys, we all have to subtype now. We got to figure out what your variant of IC, because in some variants, medication is a must. And for other variants, a different type of medication is a must. If you got pelvic floor dysfunction, there's no reason for you to be taking Elmeron. If you've got bladder wall driven, then there's no reason for you to be doing vaginal Valium suppositories unless you got, you know. So now we're trying to customize therapies based upon that patient's unique presentation. That patient has Hunner's lesions. We know Elmeron would be a waste of time pretty much, you know. And of course, now the other thing too is we've got supplements, and the supplements are you know, really popular, and doctors are embracing their use now, and they're now actively taught at the American Urology Association, and they have been for years, because they're so effective for so many patients, and they're so much safer than traditional medications. That's what the AUA guidelines say. Supplements are in step 1, traditional meds are in step 2. Why? Because supplements have fewer side effects. Rebecca says she's very afraid to try anything because she recently did a B complex and had a massive flare. Yeah, guys, B6 can be irritating for some patients. B12 is fine. You should be fine with the B12 and the folic acid and the others. Just if you can, try to avoid the B6, or at least eat foods that are high in B6. So you're not alone in having that B6 sensitivity. Stephanie, good. I'm glad. You got to be on top of that Cipro. Take them our article on our website so we know these are real FDA warnings. Hey guys, why does Urabel turn urine dark blue? It's just one of the ingredients. It just does it. Latisse is saying doctors are horrified about what's being said on Facebook. How about what's being said in doctors' offices? You know, Latisse, let me clarify that. I see experts of the top doctors in the world that are really working on subtyping, where you go into their clinic, it is a soft, warm place to land. Those are the ones that are disturbed. Those are the ones who are concerned that patients are being led down the wrong pathway. How do you get restroom access cards on our website? You can buy them. The email address for the freebies is icnetwork@mac.com. icnetwork@mac.com. Happy to do it. Linda, do we send our magazine to Canada? Yes, but Linda, you can sign up for the $25 subscription and have it emailed to you. Easy peasy. Shatsy, how can you tell if you've been floxed? I use Levaquin for pneumonia, started having tingling on my foot. You're going to have to, hon, you're going to have to dive into, go to our website, read the article, and you're going to have to go to some of those support groups and experts, okay? I wish I had an answer for you. I don't. That's outside of my expertise. But what you should be doing is warning everybody about Levaquin doing that to you. You have been floxed if you have a chronic nerve pain syndrome. That is the classic worrisome side effect of Cipro and Levaquin. Kay says, when I had a cystoscopy, they showed me that blood was trapped between the lining and my bladder. What does that mean? I don't know. I mean, you could have had bruising. I mean, the bladder can bruise like any other part of the body. So maybe something happened that caused some bruising. Renee says, my pelvic floor recommended steroid shots inside your vaginal wall. Scares me to death to attempt that because cortisone shot gave me severe pain in my wrist. Doctor said I react to cortisone. Well, you need to tell her that you react to cortisone. I wouldn't do it if you had an issue with cortisone. Maybe they can do a nerve block instead. I've had steroid shots in my SI joint, didn't have any issues with it, but I don't have any problems with cortisone. You do. So you need to tell your pelvic floor therapist that you have an issue. I would hate to do that and for you to have a reaction in your vagina. That would be brutal. I think your instinct is absolutely right on that. Instead, look at dry needling. Ask if you can do dry needling instead. Dana said she had to really retrain herself with pushing with pee. Your urologist told you never to push. Good. Delia said hydrodistension made her feel worse. Yeah, it can at first. Hydrodistensions are now meant to be done as a low pressure short duration, not a high pressure long duration. Tiffany asks on YouTube, is taking Preleaf daily bad for you? Only in large quantities. But, you know, I mean, you take it when you're going to eat. The problem is that some patients just eat it like candy, you know, all day. They just eat it like candy. And you don't want to do that with any supplement. Catherine says, what test should a person have if they have had a lot of Cipro? I don't know. You have to Google it. They're going to look for nerve pain. So they're going to do kind of nerve testing and they'll look at tendon stuff and stuff like that. And she's asking about low-dose immunology treatment. I don't know, hun. So how do we understand if we have a pudendal nerve injury? You have nerve pain. It means you have nerve pain, sharp shooting nerve pain. And it's usually localized in a specific area, and it's made worse by movement. Standing is fine, sitting is hurt, or bending over is hurt, something like that. Shooting pain down your legs, sciatica, things like that. Diana, what subtype is Hunter's ulcers? Subtype 1, Hunter's ulcers. Delia, could headaches be related to IC? In the related conditions research, migraines have actually been a small subset for some patients. I had migraines for about 6 months myself. We know that some patients have TMJ. A very interesting research study is, I mean, of all the related conditions, TMJ is very strongly associated with IC and chronic fatigue and IBS and fibromyalgia, which is really interesting. You know, it's kind of a systemic nerve muscle thing. And there was a research study that found that people with TMJ, we clench our jaws. I'm one of them. I really aggravated my left side 2 weeks ago. I know exactly why. I was really stressed out about something. And we also know that people with TMJ are more likely to clench their pelvic floor. It's like you have body-wide clenching reactions. So I would wonder if you're clenching. I would wonder if you're holding a lot of tension in your neck, in your shoulders, in your lower back. You know, whenever they do neck physical therapy, and for me, if my neck gets really bad, I would get pain kind of up my temples like this. And so when you have your physical therapy, I mean, they're working like this, but they're doing a lot of shoulder work and back work. Oops, there's my bra. Sarah, you have sharp nerve pain down your legs, sciatica. That means you've got tight piriformis muscles, my dear. That's usually what that is a tight piriformis muscle clenching on that nerve. All right, there's one other warning that I wanted to get out. What the heck was it? I do have in this magazine a very interesting success story. A 72-year-old man with IC. Let me read that. It's not a warning. Actually, it's a good story. I think this was what I wanted to say. And he wrote into me and he said, I was diagnosed with IC by a urologist 15 years ago. I could not tolerate Elmeron. I had 7 bladder installations or distensions, which used to give me relief, but the last one didn't. I was just living with it, urinating 50 times per 24 hours. I started taking 2.5 milligrams of Cura Wellness CBD oil as it was claimed to help sleep. Between having IC and getting older, and he's 68, not 72, I was not sleeping well, to say the least, and it has actually helped my sleep, even though I'm taking it in the morning. I wake up now earlier, and I'm totally awake and ready to take on the day. Little could I imagine in only 2 months that I would experience 80 to 90% relief from both. I can now drink coffee and even drink beer without causing horrendous pain in my bladder and penis that I once had for years. I urinate much less often, getting up at night 2 to 3 times instead of 10. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that CBD oil has helped tremendously for my IC. Maybe it won't work for all, but it's worked for me, and my quality of life is 1,000 times better.
So he just wanted patients to know he's on the standard dose, 2.5 milligrams. And he wanted to share his success with others. All right. So again, it's all in our latest magazine of the IC Optimist. Please come to our website and subscribe to it. All right, my friends, listen, we've been going on for almost 3 hours and 48 minutes. Wow, that might be my personal record for streaming. I always end these meetings with a very important message. If there's anything you've heard from me today, it is that IC is not your fault. You have done nothing wrong. There is no shame. There is no blame. I don't want you to feel guilty. I don't want you to feel like you're damaged goods. I don't want you to feel like you're unworthy of love. I want you to know that you deserve the same love and compassion that you would give a family member who had cancer or who was hit by a car. You deserve that same love and attention. But, you know, I mean, now listen, we IC patients, number one, it's embarrassing. Who the hell wants to tell anybody we got bladder pain? For God's sake, we want to hide it, right? Everybody wants to hide it. But you should not be suffering in silence, my friends. You should not be suffering in silence. If you need support, you ask for the support. Don't expect your family to read your mind. Share with them your struggles and let them know what's going on. But you've got some family members who could care less. And if you've got family members like that, that's when you turn to your IC friends. You can come to the IC Network support forum. You can go into support groups. You know, the reality is listen, if you have a flare, no family member is going to be able to say to you, I get it. But you know what? I can. A support group leader can, because we've been there. And one of the mistakes we often make is you're at home all day suffering, and then your partner comes home after work. And what do? You vent. You tell them how miserable your day was, and you're just praying that they're going to say exactly what you need to hear. But here's the reality, my friends. They will never be able to say exactly what you need to hear because they don't have IC. We have IC. It's very important that you build your support network. So if you have a flare, you can call somebody. You can get on the internet. You can come to the forum. You can even call me. And if I'm available, I'll be happy to talk to you. We're the ones who can give you that cyber hug and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. The exact same thing happened to me when I had spaghetti. Here's what I did instead. I did pesto sauce or I did white sauce. Don't expect your partner to get it completely. Doctors don't get it completely. There's only one doctor in the country who tried to experience the bladder pain that we tried, Chris Payne. And he put something very irritating in his bladder to get it. He lasted a minute before he pulled it out. That was how bad it was. That is why his doctor's office is a wonderful place to go, because he gets it, right? Okay, so I'm kind of wandering here. But anyway, I need you to do 3 things every day. 3 things every day, little itty bitty things, but over time, they're only going to help. Number 1, do something for your spirit. Do something for your spirit, something that gives you peace. It can be going to church. It can be reading poetry. It can be taking a hike. But for 15 minutes, do something that nourishes your soul. Get off of Facebook. Get off of social networking. Don't talk about politics to anybody. Go outside and count the butterflies. You know, something, anyone to give you peace. You know what I do is, as I go to bed late, like 2 in the morning. And there I follow on Twitter Irish farmers. And there's this wonderful Irish farmer, Zwartbulls. Let me write it down. It's ZWARTBLES. The Zwartbulls. She's this amazing blogger. She runs a farm of sheep, and it's lambing season. And they're getting up when we're going to sleep, and you get to see all the lambs frolicking, and it's just wonderful. So for God's sake, get out of our crazy US stress, politics, whatever. Go outside, do something that gives you nourishment. Number one. Number two, do something for your bladder and your pelvis every day, whether it's doing your physical therapy or driving by Starbucks instead of stopping, or shopping for the right thing, or creating an IC-friendly meal. Do something that we know is going to help your body. And then number three, oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. What's number three? Oh my God. I've been talking too long. Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. Hello, menopause brain. I call it memopause. You got so relevant. Do something for your brain, for God's sake. Build your knowledge on IC. Hey, listen, nobody could ever tell me IC isn't real. I can pound them. I can pound them with 20 years of research, because that's what I do every day is I read research. Every day, read one article about IC, not a Facebook post. For God's sake, go to the National Library of Medicine, come to the IC Network, go to the IC website, pick a topic, any topic, just read it and absorb it. One a day. And what you're going to find over time is you're going to become so knowledgeable and informed that you're going to become the teacher with your medical care providers. And that's a really good thing. And if you just read the AUA guidelines, that's already going to put you ahead of 90% of the urologists out there, because 90% probably haven't even read them. You will be so powerful, so informed. You are ready to kick butt, my friends. I like it. I like it very, very much. Okay. I got to go. I'm about talked out. I wish you well, my friends. I wish you well. Please come on over to the IC Network. Come take a visit. Say hi in the IC Network support forum. Please like our Facebook page. Please come on over to our YouTube channel if you can. And please like our YouTube channel. I need to get 10,000 likes on our YouTube channel. I think we only have 3,000 or 4,000 right now. That way I can offer more things on YouTube. So I would really appreciate it if you guys on Facebook could come on over to YouTube. It's youtube.com/ICN Jill. Alrighty? Okay, my friends. I will see you later, alligator. In a while, crocodile. See you soon, baboon. There's more to that. That's a favorite in my family when we leave. All right, see you later. All right, YouTube. See you later.